And you're live.
Good evening. This is Adam Yaron, City of Scottsdale Long Range Planning Project Coordination Liaison. Today's date is Tuesday, September 8th, 2020, and tonight's meeting is the General Plan Citizen Review Committee. For those of you watching at home, the 2035 General Plan Update Citizen Review Committee consists predominantly of either the chair or vice chair from each of the city's boards and commissions that has related content within the general plan. The purpose of the committee is to review the content of the draft plan during public meetings and make suggestions as to any proposed adjustments to the plan. This committee will ultimately recommend a final draft general plan for review by the community, Scottsdale Planning Commission, and Scottsdale City Council so as to adopt an updated general plan that can then be sent to the November 2021 ballot for voter ratification consideration per state law requirements. Until further notice, the General Plan Citizen Review Committee will be held electronically. And while physical facilities are not open to the public, these meetings are conducted on Cox Cable 11, Channel 11, as well as YouTube Live in the instance of tonight's meetings to allow for the public to listen and view the meeting in progress. Only written comments submitted electronically at least 1 hour prior to the meeting are being accepted. And a written public comment may be submitted electronically by clicking on the click here to submit a public comment on an item link located atop each page of the agenda. Taylor, next slide, please. We have in tonight's attendance, and we'll do a roll call attendance. Committee member Larry Bernowski.
Present.
Committee member Carol Moraldi.
Present.
Notably, committee member Carol Moraldi will be replacing committee member Cromarty as representative of the Neighborhood Advisory Commission moving forward. Committee member Steve Dodd.
Present.
Committee member Janice Eng.
Present.
Committee member Pamela Yakovo.
Present.
Committee member Ryan Johnson.
Here.
Committee member Kurt Jones.
Here.
Committee member Richard Newman.
Present.
Committee member Sheila Raymond.
Present. Thank you.
Committee member William Scarborough.
Present.
Committee member Blair Schweiger.
Present. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee member Eloy Indigoyan.
Here.
Eloy, please tell me if I pronounced that correctly.
Yep, that was great. Thank you so much.
Great. And notably, committee member Indigoyan will be replacing committee member Shannon Scutari from the Scottsdale's IDA. And we also have in attendance this evening committee member Janice Shimakubo.
Present.
Thank you. Also in attendance this evening, members from staff include Aaron Pro, Long Range Planning Director, myself, Adam Yaron, as Project Coordination Liaison, Taylor Reynolds.
Present.
Thank you. We also have, related to a couple items on tonight's agenda, other city staff in attendance. We have Chief Alan Rodbell. We have Assistant Chief Helen Gandara. We have Assistant Chief Scott Pop, who I believe was planning to be in attendance, although had a conflict with the City Council meeting. And we have staff member Cassie Johnson, also from Scottsdale Police.
Present.
We also have in attendance this evening Scottsdale Economic Development Director Rob Millar.
Present.
Thank you. Tonight's first item on the agenda is going to be approving the meeting minutes of June 29th, 2020. Those minutes were sent out with your agenda packet, and staff recommends that the CRC review and approve the draft meeting minutes for the regular meeting of the General Plan Update Citizen Review Committee that occurred on Monday, June 29th, 2020. Could I ask for a motion to approve or any comments? I guess any comments first. Let me ask that you raise your hand. Seeing none, could I ask for a motion for approval for the meeting minutes of June 29th, 2020?
This is Janice Shimakubo. I move to approve the meeting minutes of Monday, June 29th, 2020.
Thanks. Could I ask for a second? I see a hand raised by committee member Bernowski.
I second.
Thank you. We'll ask for a roll call vote at this time. Committee Member Bernowski. Committee Member Bernowski.
Yes.
Thank you. Committee Member Maraldi.
Yes.
Committee Member Dodd.
Yes.
Committee Member Eng.
Yes.
Committee Member Yakovo.
Yes.
Committee Member Johnson. We'll come back.
Yes.
Oh, thank you very much. Committee Member Jones.
Yes.
Committee Member Newman.
Yes.
Committee Member Raymond.
Yes.
Committee Member Scarborough.
Yes.
Thank you. Committee Member Schweiger.
Yes.
Thank you. Committee Member Indigoyan.
Yes.
Committee Member Shimakubo.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. With respect to the remaining items on tonight's agenda, we've got a couple move around items just based on other staff in attendance. We're going to keep item 2 as the safety element, which we'll present shortly. And then following item 2 of the safety element, we will be moving item number 4 ahead of item number 3, just to give recognition to other staff in attendance, and we'll move on at that point. With respect to the safety element, again, item 2 of tonight's agenda, we have, as I mentioned, a number of city staff in attendance. And Taylor, if you would advance the slide, please. We'll be going through confirmation and receipt of public comments submitted on this agenda item. We'll be the Citizen Review Committee will be presented with a presentation by Chief Alan Rodbell, and we'll be reviewing, discussing, and potentially approving the incorporation of suggested legislative edits based on comments made by the public, city staff, and CRC members. With respect to item 2 of tonight's agenda, there have been no public comments received. Next slide, Taylor. And if you'll all recall from your agenda packet, there were a series of comments that were provided on pages 163 and 164 of the draft plan, to which there were comments made on the meeting entry minutes of June 15th, 2020, which were proposed text additions by the Citizen Review Committee that had and warranted comment and review by our affected city departments. And so this evening we've got, as I mentioned, Chief Alan Rodbell and staff in attendance to help provide some response to those items presented on pages 163 and 164 highlighted in yellow, which will allow for there to be discussion and consideration of the presentation with respect to those proposed text items. Chief Rodbell, if you would, we have your presentation available and can advance the slides upon your direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good evening, committee members. Thank you for this opportunity to talk with you about several issues that you'd like to include in the general plan. If you just go to the first slide for me, please. So just real quickly, what this slide will demonstrate for you is a couple things. On the left side of the screen is actually screenshots from a product that we're already using on the topic of looking at crime trending to predict issues that might be coming up in the future. So just so you know what you're looking at, on the left-hand side, we have a product called LexisNexis. It's it's used by a crime analysis unit. Both these products. One is the bottom one is the community crime map, and our unit uses this to kind of measure what's happening. They look for patterns of behavior. They'll look for time and dates where things may be occurring. And this is how they use, that's how they currently use an opportunity to look at this is occurring. We need resources into this particular area and address a problem. Again, those are screenshots from the product itself, not necessarily about Scottsdale itself. You can see it says Sacramento on the screen. But the product on the other side of the chart, on the right side, is actually our city. And this is Corona Solutions called Discover. And we use this for patrol deployment. So traditionally in police work, we would look at coverage, one officer per beat, and how much work an officer do during the course of their schedule. And that's how we would divide up beats and decide how many officers you needed per district station per shift. We look now today, not just at beats, but we look at workload. And so the Corona Solutions, through quite frankly, generations of guesswork and sort of other systems, Corona Solutions is finally a software package, which allows us to look at how much work there is to be done, and therefore how many officers you need to employ to get that work done. Now, there's some caveats to that. There's time in there for court. There's time in there for administrative duties. There's time in there for training. There's time in there for community policing. There's time in there for preventive patrol. So it isn't just going from call to call to call, but that component of how much work there is to do in an area it does in fact play into how many officers we ask to employ for the city of Scottsdale, and again, the size of the beat. So that's the difference between deploying by workload and deploying by coverage. Unfortunately, today, sitting here, I will tell you, as a result of attrition, we actually find ourselves in a world where we're actually going back to almost a coverage model, which is not ideal. We'd much rather be using a model for workload. But let me just I just want to show you what these screens are, so while I'm talking, you'll see how we do things, or what kinds of products we have available to us. We, for a long time in law enforcement, we started out with no technology. There was no research and development being done for the public sector. It was all in the private sector. So we basically would put maps up on a wall back in the 70s and put colored pins in the wall, basically where crime was occurring, with the sole purpose of trying to find out where the bulk of activity was taking place and about what time it was taking place and what kinds of activities were taking place in that area. And we would deploy to that extra resources, teams to address those problems. And that was really the advent of really community policing and problem-oriented policing, identifying the problems and addressing it. Today, we do basically the same thing by use of computers, but we can open up so many other data ports which we can use to help us predict. It is a matter of fact, something happened, but we can look at social media. We can monitor that and see what the buzz is about and what's going on. We can look at sales on eBay or any offer up and see where stolen property is being sold. We can use certainly the data of crime committed, but we can also look at movement. And we can look at time of day, and we can look at geography, and the reason for that being shopping centers, golf courses, if it's theft from parking lots. We can look at patterns of behavior and deploy. As we get better at this and more technologies, new technologies are developed, we'll get much better at predicting crime in the future. So your objective here to do crime tracking and trending and predictive model is really spot on where we want to go in the future. I would ask that as you develop a general plan in this particular category, you start thinking about not necessarily naming a product, obviously, because products change, products improve, they go out of business, new vendors show up, but a more global approach would be to making sure that we leverage technology that's available and to make our streets and communities safer and give us a little bit more flexibility in where we're going based upon what's happening in our community. And by the way, not just our community, Scottsdale is really good at trending nationally. We look at what's happening on the West Coast and we look what's happening on the East Coast. And we can pretty much figure out that what's happening in other places eventually is going to get here. And so we literally spend time talking about how we can prevent that. And if in fact it occurs, how we'll be able to deal with it effectively. So I don't know if you have any questions on this particular issue or not, and you want to address these questions, or you want to go on the next slide.
Chief Rodbell, if you would stand by, I'll just ask the committee at this point. If you have any questions for Chief Rodbell relating to the slide, please raise your hand now. I see a hand raised by committee member Johnson.
Hi, Chief. Thank you so much for being here tonight and for the presentation. On S7.2, which is on this screen, I'm just interested in your point of view on the last couple of words. Is it really to increase offender apprehension, or is it to increase public safety?
Well, that's an excellent point. So we know that we are doing exactly this, obviously, to prevent crime from occurring. So obviously, if we know we have a high crime area, we make sure we send resources necessary to prevent future crimes. But clearly, we want to hold people accountable if they are in fact committing an offense. We have a repeat offender program, which has done so much to lower our crime rate as a result, and increase closures on crimes, because we know that a very small percentage of our public is actually committing a crime. But those that are committing crime are committing the crimes repeatedly. So we know that we make an arrest, we impact many more crimes from ever occurring. So there's an advantage to increasing apprehension, certainly, because you will shut down future crimes. You and I go to work 5 days a week. They go to work 5 days a week. I lock them up on Monday. I've saved 4 crimes that week, and every crime after that they're still under lock and key. So there are some deployment plans that actually address this very issue. If you're looking at technology and you're looking to predict, then obviously you're looking to prevent it from occurring in the first place.
Thank you, Chief. I realize it's kind of a subtlety there, but I just thought I would get your point of view on it. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Was there any other, I see a hand raised by committee member Bernowski. Committee member Bernowski, if you're speaking, you're currently muted.
Okay, I apologize. Chief, thanks for your presentation and for coming tonight. The technology you're talking about, is that exclusively within the police department, or is that either the information or the input or the output shared with other parts of the city that might have an interest in whatever the situation happens to be?
So the answer to that question is it depends, obviously, but certainly with Neighborhood Watch, we share a lot of information with Neighborhood Watch. We're also a resource to the community. If the community calls in or goes online, if they're going to buy a home, want to move to Scottsdale, they can actually access some information that will tell them about the neighborhood they're moving into or looking to move into. So it's a resource for the community, but we also do share it internally with those departments that have a need for this information. When you start talking about crime and sensitive information that we may not be able to share, then sometimes we don't share that. But for the most part, lots of things that we can identify, we share. Again, our community crime map is available online.
So when you do get a call, do you kind of triage whether, okay, I need to send a policeman or squad car, or are there other assets that you might deem that might help with the situation?
Okay, yeah. So I think we're getting into the next slide about our resources to deal with things that perhaps aren't necessarily the sole realm of law enforcement. Here we're talking about crimes being committed. Chances are pretty good, unless we're in a prevention aspect, we would enlist the assistance of other departments within the city, and maybe even non-police department, non-city enforcement agencies. But in this case, we're really talking about crimes, and so we probably won't talk to other agencies about crimes that we're investigating unless it's in everyone's best interest that they be part of the solution. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay. That does kind of bring us to the second slide if you want to move on to this. Otherwise, we can still talk about technology. Again, I'm very supportive of your concept here. I just want to make sure that when you write a general plan that's going to take us into the future, that it gives us the flexibility, because we don't know where the new technologies are going to take us. For those of us that are old enough to remember, the Dick Tracy's Risk Radio, they never thought everybody's wearing a watch now that does all of that and more, the access to the internet and get all kinds of information. And so we're way beyond that already. So as you write this, you want to give me, or give the future chiefs and future police departments, the ability to be flexible in where technology takes us, with the goal in mind that safer streets is really what we're all after. And I'll go to the second slide. So you're looking at a dog, right? You can't get mad at me with a dog picture. This is Chase. Chase is our stress management dog. We were the first police department in the country to have a stress management dog assigned to the police department. Lots of other departments had access to some other department within city government or private nonprofit that had stress management dogs, but we were the first in the country to have a dog. His name was Fonzie. He's since passed away after a decade or so of community service. But this is one of the dogs that's assigned to our police crisis intervention specialist team. They are master's level counselors that literally work for the police department. This is an incredibly innovative idea that the city of Scottsdale developed back in the 1970s. That was unheard of. Many police departments, I came from Montgomery County, we worked hand in glove with the health department. They had stress management team that kind of assisted us on calls for service where their services were needed, but they work for another department. We have a crisis team that literally master's level counselors and that literally work for the police department and respond to our requests for scenes that we need their expertise. So we're very unique that way. This particular animal is just a stress management dog that we use with crime victims, young children, even officers perhaps that may have been involved in something stressful. So that's the purpose for the picture of the dog. We do lots of partnerships with throughout our organization and outside of our organization to deal with topics of concern. Certainly have come to the forefront recently throughout the country. We are so far ahead of the game, and I couldn't be more proud. Now there's more we can do. So I'm going to do an experiment. I'm going to tell you about that in a second. But our police crisis intervention specialist team has been out there again since the 1970s, and they respond at our request when dealing with people who are going through mental health crisis. They may have substance abuse issues, family issues, out of control children, homelessness, or any other social service need. We have officers in our department all receive mental health first aid. So all of us have a little bit of crisis intervention skill sets to at least get us to the point where we can get involved in a situation. We can de-escalate the situation, and we have time to ask for assistance. We have about 138 of our officers out of 400, so about 38%. Our officers have a higher skill set called crisis intervention team. And the CIT team members are officers on all the shifts that respond as officers are de-escalating a situation or find that there's need for a higher skill set. This is happening throughout the state of Arizona and certainly throughout the Valley. We work together with all the other departments in our training and our skill development. And so we really are doing really well with this. But I understand the whole concept of defunding the police at its least threatening to law enforcement. And I say it that way because people use the defunding concept as take money away from the police. And the first thing that happens when you take money away from police departments, the first thing that's cut is training. When we're in tough budget years, the first thing I cut is training because I am 79 to 81% people costs. So if you take my $100 million plus budget, 81% of that is the cost of personnel. So the rest of that's lights on, weapons, vehicles, gasoline, buildings, paper, whatever. It's a very small amount of money that goes to that. So the first thing I cut is training. So when you hear de-escalation, the threatening part is, okay, we're going to take training away from the police, which is the last thing in today's world, in today's environment, we want to do. But if you look at if you look at the defunding concept and you say, okay, what is at the least threatening? If you take responsibilities away from the police and you give it to agencies that are better skilled and better suited to deal with those issues. And the police can go back to being law enforcement, public safety. And so you look at it as if we could send crisis counselors out as first responders, we would need the police to be first responders on calls like homelessness, mental health issues, family fights, all the things that you may need some higher level of expertise in being able to diffuse. And you wouldn't necessarily have to introduce a law enforcement officer with all of the tools they bring to the scene into the event. So we're going to do an experiment here in Scottsdale. I announced this a little while ago. We're working on this, but we're going to take a PCIS worker who's that counselor at the master's level that does crisis intervention. And because we're still concerned with their safety, lots of officers get hurt on these calls for service. We're going to take an officer that has a higher level of skill set, CIT and beyond, crisis intervention team specialist and beyond. And we're going to team them with a PCIS employee, and we're going to make them a first responder unit. And if we can take workload away from the police officer on the street by deploying these two out to those calls for service as first responders, then I need less police officers. And if I need less police officers because there's less work for them to do, then you can lower the budget in the police department and purchase more crisis counselors. And so you look at defunding as, again, a non-threatening concept of taking responsibilities away from the police and giving it to people who are better prepared and better skilled, then that works. So we're going to do experiment here. We've already started the ball to talk about this and how this will work. We're a couple of weeks away, but we're going to see whether or not we can shift some of that workload away from the patrol officer. And we'll see how successful we are. If I'm successful, then you'll see a budget package that talks about this very issue. So to your point, your goal here, 710 and 712 is really kind of sort of like takes a look at that to see if that really makes sense, if it really works. Now, again, I have to balance the safety of the social worker going into a family fight situation, dealing with somebody who's mentally ill or having an issue or drug abusing and having an overdose issue, and making sure that they're going to be safe and they can do that safely. So we have to figure out how this will work. But we're well on our way to taking a look at this. And I think that this will do well with what you're hoping, what your goals are hoping to achieve. Questions about that?
Thank you, Chief Rodbell. I have a hand raised by Committee Member Jones and then Yakovo.
Yeah, hi, Chief. Thank you for the presentation. This is more of just a comment and a suggestion with regards to these two goals. I don't believe that these two goals are, I don't know, worthy of a 2035 general plan document. I think this is more of, if something, it's more of a report and a future direction for the police department based on something specific. I think these 2 points were probably made back in the middle of June when we were at the height of watching a lot of stuff on TV. And I just think that, I don't think we need in our general plan a goal of reassigning police to other departments. And, I don't see that anywhere else in the general plan. I don't, if I have an issue with the planning department, I don't say, well, we should probably reassign them to the transportation department. So I'm just thinking that these two goals are too specific for our general plan, and I'm suggesting that we remove them. And so that's, if that can be in a form of a motion, I'll make it. Thank you.
I will tell you that clearly that's the committee's work. We're going to do this regardless. I mean, I've been here long enough to recognize, again, trending and what's happening in America. And although we have a great system with our PCIS workers, and they're amazing, and our officers are trained and better skilled than a lot of other police departments. And as you can see from our results, we do fairly well. So we're going to do this regardless. And so I don't disagree with you. I just don't, if you guys are having a discussion over whether this belongs in the plan or not, I'm just assuring those of you that want to see this, that we're going to work on it anyway. So if that's the issue, if you want to make sure that it gets done, I'm telling you, I'm not saying we're going to do it, I'm saying we're in the midst of doing it. To see if this in fact makes sense for our community. So I get it. I don't disagree. I guess you guys are having this conversation as a committee. And I want you to know that whether you land on this as being part of your plan or not, it is part of my plan. And we are a strategic planning organization. So this is where again, we've already started this. We're having conversations about how this works and what it looks like. And then we'll have some results. And at the end of the day, we'll say, yeah, it works, or no, it's dangerous, or it has to be tweaked. I'm a pretty good halftime quarterback coach. When I can see something's going south and not working out, I can make the adjustments and bring it back into where it needs to be. I appreciate that comment, sir. I don't disagree. I want you to know that for those of you that are committed that this needs to happen, I'm assuring you that we are working on making this happen, and through the use of seeing if it works and what adjustments need to be made. Does that make sense?
Thank you, Chief. I see a hand raised by Committee Member Yakovo and then Eng, and I'll recognize that we do have a motion from Committee Member Jones. If the next two speakers want to second the motion, we can go about it that route. But in any event, Committee Member Yakovo.
Yes, I have more of a question for the chief. So if you have explained very eloquently that the Scottsdale Police Department is in the process of refining what we're doing, which is commendable. I was curious, so with the general public carrying weapons or being assigned, guns or whatever, would the PCIS folks be armed also or be unarmed?
So at this time, committee member, the PCIS folks are unarmed, non-sworn. They have arrest powers, civilians. They're master level counselors, and I don't think any of them want to carry weapons. We do have some civilian employees that carry, pepper spray for their own protection, even if they encounter, animals. It gives them an opportunity to get away. And that's all it's for. It's not for taking anybody down. It's for just escaping. PCIS has never made a request for a weapon. I doubt they ever will. That's one of the reasons I'm treading lightly and sending a well-trained officer with them, just to make sure that during the course of the experiment, because now they're first responders. Before, I had an officer on the scene asking for their assistance. Now they're first responders. They're literally the first ones knocking on the door and going into the house. And so because I want to make sure that they can be safe, I want to, during the experimental phase, to see how this works. And because they're unarmed, they'll always have an officer with them. Can we eventually get to the point where they don't have officers with them? I don't know the answer to that. There may be times when we're comfortable enough to know that or feel that they know walking in, if it doesn't feel right, to leave, as opposed to going deeper into the house or the room or wherever they're at. So as of right now, the answer to your question, long-winded answer, the long answer to your question is no, they're not armed. My intention is not to give them weapons. My intention now is to send them in with a well-trained officer, again, trained in de-escalation, trained in crisis intervention, trained in mental health issues, and that's my intention at the present time.
Thank you. And then regarding the comment about the motion to remove these items from the general plan, in concept, I agree with that. I was going to make a suggestion that we use the language in S7.12 to just indicate a collaboration with social services entities to develop best practices to respond to calls with the appropriate agencies using, law enforcement or whatever. So that we're not actually dictating what needs to be done, but that we will collaborate with multiple agencies to respond to situations that are of public interest for safety, something like that. Thank you.
If I could just comment on that real quick. I know that there's a motion on the table. I probably shouldn't be speaking, but just so you know, we are already doing that. We receive all of our crisis intervention training from outside entities that have expertise in the field, social services, nonprofits. So we are already doing that. I have no problem with it being in there, just so you know that, but be aware of the fact that we've been doing that for years and we will continue doing that. So thank you.
Thank you. This is Adam with the city. Just recognizing we had a motion from Committee Member Jones for the removal of 710 and 712, and Committee Member Yakovo in rewording 7.12. And as I'm taking notes, Committee Member Yakovo, if you could respond to this, if a rewrite were to be made without including S 7.10, it would state, collaborate with other entities to develop best practices to direct law enforcement calls to the appropriate agencies, period.
Yes, that would be adequate for me.
Thank you. I have 3 more hands and I'm going to try and call them in order. I apologize if I'm misordering them based on they've been up now for a little bit of time. Committee Member Eng and then Scarborough, followed by Shimakubo.
Yes, thank you very much. And Chief, that was an excellent presentation so far. I had raised my hand to second Committee Person Jones's motion. I really don't think it's appropriate because, as the Chief said, these are ongoing things that the police department is doing. If anything, maybe we should rewrite something to, I don't know, continue to collaborate to and implement best practices or something like that. But I personally would like to see us just take out 7.10 and 7.12. So I would second Committee Person Jones's motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee Member Scarborough.
I'll, I guess, third the motion made by Committee Member Jones. I believe this is granular and I don't think it's appropriate for the general plan. So I'm yet another supporter of that motion. Thank you.
Thank you. I see a hand raised by Committee Member Shimakubo.
Yes, this is Janice Shimakubo. Thank you. And thank you, Chief Rodbell, for your presentation. I would suggest that we then take 7.9 and perhaps modify that to say something to the effect of continuously evaluate police roles, functions, and responsibilities and their effectiveness for community safety and collaboration. And we may be able to add some of the other committee members' language about best practices under that word collaboration, as opposed to adding another goal. Thank you.
Thank you, Committee Member Shimakubo. I see 3 more hand raised. We'll start with Committee Member Bernowski, then Scarborough, and then Eng. Committee Member Bernowski, you're muted.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with taking it out, but I think the chief seems to make a case for keeping it in because they're on the forefront of actually starting these. He has an experiment going. I might suggest maybe we change the wording rather than to actually direct to reassign, but more to evaluate the projects that the chief has ongoing and as we go forward, so that we could take a look at those and also that, but in the long-term goal that we're looking to best reassign and reducing direct police force involvement where it's not needed. Thank you.
This is Adam with the city. I don't see any other hand raised. Committee Member Bernowski, if you could lower yours for a moment. I'll try and do my best to capture some of the discussion here and ask that both the motion maker and second motion maker consider the last comment or suggestion made by Committee Member Shimakubo, which was, real quick, I'm going to ask Taylor to pull up the page 163, safety policy S 7.9. It appears that we've got discussion and it sounded like broadly support by other committee members, although it doesn't seem like we've taken consensus yet. But the suggestion was to not include 7.10 on page 163 or 7.12 on page 164, but rather by Committee Member Shimakubo's proposal would be to add the words continuously to the heading of S 7.9. So it reads as follows: continuously evaluate police roles, functions, and responsibilities and their effectiveness for providing community safety and collaboration, period. Committee Member Jones first, and then Eng, could I ask you to respond to those 2 proposals?
I'm fine with changing, this is a committee member Jones. I'm fine with changing 7.9 to add that word continuously and remove the two that I suggested. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee member Eng.
I would agree to that as well. Thank you.
Great. Could I see hands of support for that proposal? Please raise your hands now. Thank you. It appears we do have consensus amongst the Citizen Review Committee, and so we will incorporate that as follows: continuously to the heading of 7.9 and not incorporating safety policy S 7.10 or S 7.12. Taylor, did the chief have any additional slides, or we had additional policies for S 7.11 and S 7.13 that we could have presented on the screen, and we'll advance the presentation by Chief Rodbell.
So
Chief Rodbell, I apologize real quick. I apologize to cut you off, but before we advance it, I see two hands, one raised by Committee Member Dodd and Committee Member Newman. Do you have a question?
No, mine's down. Commissioner Dodd's down.
Okay, thank you. Chief Rodbell, go ahead.
So here's something that I think we do really well. We could do even better, and we're in the process of doing just that. So again, you caught me doing something right. You'll see on the top, it talks about community engagement groups. So what we did was a couple years ago, we have 4 police districts. And in each district station, I asked all the district commanders to identify people within their area of responsibility that represent their community. And all 4 districts are very different. One is the downtown area with all of the shops and restaurants and high rises. One is the older section, South Scottsdale, with folks that have lived here longer and have, born and raised here, perhaps lived in the neighborhoods for a while. Then you had the middle area of the city between Fountain Hills and Phoenix, and then you had the north side with lockdown communities, with gated communities and associations and a few shopping centers. And so every community was different. So I said, look at your community and try to identify those people that represent every facet of your community and activity. And so they put together a list of folks, very, very diverse group of people that represent their individual areas. I then took a sort of representation from each of those 4 districts and then incorporated into my community engagement group representatives of the 2 NAACPs, 100-Man Club, Urban League, the Hispanic community leadership, the C community, the LGBTQ community, representations from the business community, the event community, the resort communities. And I brought all those folks together into my community engagement group. And we talk about police policies. We talk about anything that occurs that is current. We talk about how we're handling COVID recently. We talked recently about our use of force policies, and we actually demonstrated use of force policies to this group. We took them to our training and showed how we're being trained. We took them to our crime lab and showed them how we process evidence. So we've given them sort of like open door to the organization and talk about any issue, and then we bounce issues off of them that are concerning to us as well to get their advice. This has been a very, very successful program for us. And it has given us an opportunity to literally have conversations with our entire community, as opposed to just those people that come to our attention for one reason or another. So that's been going on for a while. One of the things that I needed to improve on, though, we've always had community involvement on our use of force boards and our major incident boards and our what's called our safe site committee, which is really our accident committee. When officers involved in accidents, it goes before board. And we've always had some membership, but I didn't feel after recent events that we had enough citizen involvement. And so we are increasing the number of citizens we have on those committees. We just went through a process of self-nomination and interviews. And mostly the interviews were not so much to find out what their thought processes were as much as their availability, because these committees can be quite time consuming and demanding. And out of the 12 applications, I believe there were 12 applications, all 12 candidates were selected. Very diverse group. So we will draw from this group to have more members of our community in our reviews of all of our use of force, all of our major incidents, and our police accidents. That is happening as we speak. The restorative justice program you see up there is something that started back in 2016. We've been doing it for a while. We talked about keeping young people, first offenders, out of the criminal justice system. How can we do a better job? Now, my experience, my background back in Montgomery County, Maryland, is this is what I did for a living as a young detective. So I was very familiar with this kind of a program. We partnered with other city entities, and we came up with a program where young folks who commit nonviolent offenses, make restitution perhaps to the victims, we keep them out of court. We may give them community service. They may get counseling, but there's some other sort of diversion to going into the court system, and successful completion, that record is struck. And as you can see from the stats up there, we've been really, really successful. And although we've got a little bit of recidivism, it's low below the 34.6% rate that the state is having, the Department of Juvenile Corrections. And so great program. Lots of kids have gone through it. We're very proud of it, and it does keep kids and young people out of our system. The last thing up there is Arizona Bridge Form. It's funny, I'm laughing because I just did that this morning. That's where I've been all morning. The Bridge Forum concept came up from the community to bring stakeholders in the room and have a conversation. In the last 5 years, there have been, I think now 12 of these, and I have participated in 10. I'm sorry, I participated in 11. I wasn't invited to the first one. I'm still a little bitter about that, but I've been on all the others. And so literally we have stakeholders from the community and law enforcement having a conversation and looking for how we make changes in our communities and our departments. As a result of our involvement with Bridge Forum, we have taken 32 concepts, I think, out of one. We ended up being the scribe for one of them. We took concepts out, put them into our strategic plan, and the ones that weren't appropriate to us, either because we were already doing it or because the size of our organization, it wasn't appropriate. Literally, the ones we didn't do, we put in a report, which is online if anybody's interested. Literally, so other departments throughout the state that it might be appropriate to could take a serious look at that and deal with some of the issues and some of the challenges facing their own organizations. This morning's Bridge Forum was with all of the major sports teams and ASU, all the leadership of the major sports teams, ownership and management of the sports teams, talking about what's going on currently in major league sports with athletes, and how police chiefs can be part of a dialogue to move that forward. And so that's why I was a little bit of chuckle. I just did that today, but we're really proud of all of our outreach in the community, and we are committed, and we've already taken steps, as I said, interviews and approval of 12 people. We're committed to increasing the number of citizens we have in our review system. And with that, I'll answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. I see a hand raised by Committee Member Jones.
Chief, on the goal 7.11, it reads, assure transparency and oversight of police reporting involving citizen-community interactions. That says to me that that's basically everything that you and your force does. I guess maybe this is a question for Adam. Where did this goal come from, and what is it? It says to me that if I saw something on the road today, I can call in and say, hey, I saw you pulled over a Mercedes. What happened? What were they doing? And I'm going to get an answer. I'm just trying to figure out what's the purpose of this being, again, 7.11 being in the general plan.
Thank you, Committee Member Jones. This was proposed text language by it was drafted by the Citizen Review Committee, and so in terms of its staff's intent and language, that was again CRC language. We did have staff from the police department review this text, and they may be able to speak to it better than long range planning staff. but that's the best I can answer it at this point in time. I see a hand raised by committee member Bernowski, and perhaps either Chief Rodbell or staff member Cassie Johnson might be able to respond better to committee member Jones's question. I'll ask committee member Bernowski to address the question now.
Yes, Chief and police staff. Just a question, given the high-vis events that have gone on over the last few months, do you do any internal review of those as how either they might happen or be avoided, or the situation, how it might be handled within the Scottsdale police?
So if you're talking about the ones that are most concerning that have happened in other states, other areas, we do talk about those all the time. I would tell you that clear violations of any policies we have are certainly not something we would train. So conversations do occur, absolutely, but we don't have we're not facing those kinds of incidents. I can't tell you the officer won't do something wrong in this organization because we hire human beings, but we're very quick to address the issue. And our personnel here know that they're held accountable all the way up to including me. We're holding each other accountable. When we look at our complaints, just to give you an idea, we have fewer complaints from the public. In fact, very few use of force complaints come from our public. And many more complaints are generated internal to the organization. Now, when you have that, you have a healthy organization. If we have less complaints coming from the public, but more to each other, the things we didn't do right, missed court, didn't come to work on time, paperwork was inappropriate, had an accident, the more we hold each other accountable internally, the less you have external acting out. And so it's a good, healthy balance what we have in terms of more complaints internally than externally. We've not had the kinds of incidents that occur other places. Again, not to say we're immune to it. We do hire humans, as I said, but we do look at those things and wonder what went wrong in our policies in such a way that it would not allow that kind of activity. So, we do look at that. I look at trending. I look at what's happening around the country. Again, crime rates, activities, drug use, changes in communities' attitude. We look at all those things and try to predict, okay, how do we prevent that here? So to your point, yes, we do. We don't belabor it because for the most part, all of that you've seen are just violations of policy. We also have been an accredited agency, nationally accredited since the mid-1990s. I'm a chief that I think I'm a rarity. I have actually received a recognition for having a nationally accredited agency for over 15 years as a police chief. And so we have to adhere to national standards, just like a college university, just like a doctor. We have national standards that we have to adhere to, and we get inspected on a yearly basis to make sure we have proof that we're adhering to those policies. And one of the things I'm most proud about is they don't just talk to me. They hit the street and talk to officers, and year after year they come back and go, these guys don't just know the CALIA, they know the standards, they know the policies, they know what they're talking about. So we do hone that in continuously, and we recognize the fact that we don't have those kinds of issues, and we reinforce the fact that our people are well trained and well prepared to deal with their own stress management, perhaps, which, by the way, new key is we're definitely on top of 360 wellness here in the city and in our police department to make sure our employees are fit to work and are taking care of themselves. So we've got, and now the state is going through an accreditation program. It's not quite as, I guess, developed, I guess. I'm looking for a word to use. It's not quite developed because it just started last year, but we are looking at having state accreditation as well as national accreditation, just to make sure we can tell everybody that we're in sync with state requirements as well. National clearly has more than the state, but we want to be able to hear the state requirements as well. It'll be a lot of overlap.
I see a hand raised by.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. I see a hand raised by committee member Eng.
Yes, thank you. Chief, I'd like to ask you, are most of the police departments and the chiefs accredited such as you are in Maricopa County?
No, unfortunately. I think there's 11 in the entire state. And, you know, there's quite a few, I'm trying to remember agencies are in the state, but there's quite a few. There's like 20 here in the Valley alone. Many agencies got out of the federal, or out of the, I'm sorry, the national accreditation system because it was too demanding. And quite frankly, they couldn't keep up with the requirements. There was some thought before I got here, again, I've been here 18 years now. There was some thought about getting out of it at one time. And I clearly, when I came here, coming from Montgomery County, which was one of the first departments to be nationally accredited, I said, no, it was important to keep up to standards. So we've maintained that. I think that one of the reasons the state started it was because there was a need to have some process of evaluation of agencies, and because people didn't want to go through the national accreditation process because it made it too demanding. The state is developing their own. It's part of the Arizona Association of Chiefs of Police, of which I'm a board member. I know that it's just an additional check mark in a box that we have state accreditation because we have national accreditation. But I do think it's important that all agencies look to one or the other to have some review of their policies and make sure their policies are in sync with not just what's going on in the world today, but what's right.
Excellent. Well, based on that, I want to, and thank God you've been with us for 18 years. But when we take a look at this general plan and we're looking out till 2035, I'm just wondering if it would behoove us to have a goal in here to make sure that the Scottsdale Police Department remains accredited in the future. Because who knows, you could go somewhere else tomorrow and everything that you've been doing and saying could just go out the window depending on who comes in to replace you. So
I'm pretty sure I won't be here in 2035. It's been 45 years in this business. I'm pretty sure I'm not making 2035.
Right. So, but I'm just saying, you know, from a strategic standpoint, would you be averse to having a goal such as that put into the general plan?
If you're asking me, I'm not sure it's a general plan item because you don't have any control. We don't have any control what it will look like down the road.
Okay.
There's, you know, again, I'm trying to think when CLIA started, because I was in Montgomery County, when one of my bosses went over there to start the program. So it's been 40 years. And so who knows what's going to look like in 40 years to put something in the general plan to be part of something that may not be there. I think if you were to put something in there, you'd want to have some kind of, I don't know, there's probably a language there that says somewhere along the line, police department will have some kind of, you know, credentialing of some kind of whatever that looks like. I just don't know if you could call it CLIA, which is the national forum.
Right.
It's almost like technology. You know, technology is going to change. So if you say you buy this product, it's not going to be good for 2034 or 2035.
True,
so
but
I don't know what that language looks like.
credentialing might be the way to go then.
Sorry?
The credentialing might be the way
yeah.
to go to give you basically more leverage to change with the times.
I would have no objection to that if you're asking me.
Yeah, and I think it would be good because it assures some transparency there. And yeah, I'd like to hear if any of the other, what some of my other committee members feel. Thank you.
Could I see any more hands raised for discussion on S 7.11? And this is the incorporation of S 7.11 and S 7.13 on the screen. Committee Member Jones.
Yeah, I think a 7.11 does not need to be in the general plan. I'm fine with 7.13, so I'll make a motion to remove 7.11. That's an internal police function that will change over time on what is transparent and what they're providing for information, you know, based on city leaders and the police chief.
Thank you. I see a hand raised by Committee Member Moraldi.
Yes, I agree with previous commissioner on removing 7.11. it almost makes it sound like we suspect our police department instead of appreciating what they do for us. So I would second that motion.
Thank you. I have a first and a second to remove S 7.11, yet incorporate 7.13. Could I see hands of support raised at this point in time, please? Thank you. It appears we do have consensus to do so as amended it per tonight's discussion. And Taylor, if we could go back a couple slides to the chief's, I think, initial slide. I didn't get consensus from the committee on S 7.2, which was to use the language as presented on the screen. Could I get any hands raised for a motion? Please raise your hand now. See a hand raised by Committee Member Johnson.
Thank you. I'd like to add the words public safety. So, and increase offender apprehension and public safety. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I ask for a second or a comment? Committee Member Raymond, I see your hand raised.
I agree with the previous statement about adding the wording.
Thank you. Could I ask for hands of support at this point in time for the language to S 7.2 to add to incorporate the language as presented with the additions of and public safety at the end of that sentence? Please raise your hand now. Thank you very much. It appears we do have consensus to incorporate it as follows. And we have completed all the bring back items that were asked for as follow-up items from the Citizen Review Committee. Could I ask for a motion to incorporate those changes as amended by tonight's discussion with the legislative edits based on comments made by the public, city staff, and CRC members concerning Section 2, Community Wellbeing Chapter Safety element of the draft 2035 General Plan, pages 159 to 165. Committee Member Jones.
So moved.
Thank you. Could I ask for a second, please? I see a hand raised by Committee Member Raymond.
Second.
Thank you. We will be doing a roll call vote at this time. Committee Member Bernowski.
Yes.
Thank you. Committee Member Maraldi.
Yes.
Thank you. Committee Member Dodd.
Yes.
Thank you. Committee Member Eng.
Yes.
Thank you. Committee Member Yakovo.
Yes.
Thank you. Committee Member Johnson.
Yes.
Thank you. Committee Member Jones.
Yes.
Thank you. Committee Member Newman.
Yes.
Thank you. Committee Member Raymond.
Yes.
Thank you. Committee Member Scarborough.
Yes.
Thank you. Committee Member Schweiger.
Yes.
Thank you. Committee Member Indigoyen.
Yes.
Thank you. Committee Member Shimakubo.
Yes.
Thank you. That does complete item 2. Long-range planning staff, and I'm sure the committee would like to extend their appreciation to Chief Rodbell, as well as Assistant Chief Gandara and Pop, as well as staff member Cassie Johnson from Scottsdale Police for their attendance and presentation this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, committee members, for all the work you're doing for the city. Thank you all.
Thank you. Moving on, as I mentioned previously at the head of tonight's meeting, we will be kind of going out of order to recognize other staff in attendance. We've got now item 4 being presented by Economic Development Director Rob Millar on Section 2 Innovation and Prosperity Chapter Introduction and the Economic Vitality Element. We'll open this item up with a presentation. Well, we'll open it up rather with confirming receipt of public comments submitted on this agenda item, followed by a presentation by Rob Millar, Economic Development Director. And finally, we'll be reviewing, discussing, and potentially approving the incorporation of the suggested legislative edits based on comments made by the public, city staff, and CRC members. For tonight's item, with respect to public comments received, we did not receive any. And at this point in time, we'll be asking Economic Development Director Rob Millar to make presentation. We do have Taylor in standby who's got your presentation available. And so, Rob, if you would, just feel free to direct Taylor to prompt as necessary.
Sure. Good evening, committee members. I appreciate the time. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you for allowing me to talk to you a little bit about economic development and for all that you're doing on the committee. And obviously, this is a critical effort, and economic development is a integral component to the general plan. And as a side note, I have been with the city as long as the chief has been here, and I've always regretted following him. There's been many times I've followed him. He's actually had the dog, the police dog, with him in person, and that's really a hard act to follow. So I'll do my best. I don't have any fun slides there, but I appreciate you sticking with me. I'm going to give you a really quick 100,000 foot level of the role of economic development. I'm sure many of you are intimately aware of what we do and the impact it has on the general plan in the future. But I want to make sure we all start from a basis of giving you an understanding of where we're at now and what we've been doing for the past few years. And I look forward on some changes we're making to our economic development strategy. Next slide, please. So I'll briefly go through what is economic development, some quick facts. I'm going to close my door because somebody's vacuuming outside my office. So let me close this real quick. Sorry about that. Some upcoming developments and some of the resources we offer in economic development to our community, business community. Next slide. So this is our mission statement that defines what we do. Really what we do through economic development is to retain, grow, and attract our target industries to promote wealth generation. It's essentially our goal is to enhance the community's tax base and quality of life. And that is true through everything we do. Everything goes back to what our mission is and specific to, what is our strategy. And everything ties back to the council adopted 2015 Economic Development Strategic Plan. That was a 5-year plan, and that was intended to be 5 years. I will say that looking back on that, I think 5 years is way too long. The world changes dramatically, and I think we're all can agree that things have changed dramatically just in the past 8 months. And so we are currently updating our strategic plan, and I'll go into more detail on that in subsequent slides. Next slide, please. Just some real quick information on population, square miles. I'm sure you all know this real well. We have a workforce of 180,000 individuals, and that obviously isn't our full population, but there's a disconnect there. And we have very strong employment corridors and centers, and those are on the map to the right. We have four distinct. We have the Air Park, Shea Boulevard, downtown Scottsdale, and McDowell Boulevard. And these are identified as employment centers because of the city's strong focus on those areas, clustering of industries, and what we see as potential for a greater growth in our targeted industries, which I'll talk about in a few minutes as well. Next slide, please. And again, attracting new companies, I would say this is a four-legged stool. We attract new companies. That's obviously important to make sure that we are growing our industry base, retaining businesses, 75 to 80%, depending on the environment at the time, of new jobs come from companies that are currently in Scottsdale that are growing. Attracting workforce is a driving leading indicator of companies that are willing and able to grow in our community and to look at Scottsdale and community alignment. Obviously, being in alignment with what the general plan is earmarked and other policy documents throughout the city of Scottsdale, we need to be in alignment on those, so we're in concert with what growing our local economy. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, our strategic plan identifies our target industries, and those are advanced business services, which is insurance and the financial services sector, bio life sciences, healthcare, life sciences, hospitality, and technology. Tourism is obviously part of our target industries, always has been and always will be. But what really we focus on over the past 4.5 years is to how do we further diversify our target industries. I would say that 9/11 taught us a great deal about being overly focused on tourism. when tourism slows down in a heavily tourism-based economy. We saw that, and then we had the recession, the Great Recession, and we took it as, I would say, a double punch. And then it was after that that we updated our strategic plan and talked about the importance of diversifying and making sure that we are ready for the next time when our tourism is going to have an impact, and we want to make sure that we're diversified and ready to absorb that impact as best as we can. We don't operate as an island in Scottsdale. Our economy is not an island as much as we would like to say when it comes to state shared revenues and things of those nature, but we work regionally. So we're partners of the Greater Phoenix Economic Council, one of 26 cities and towns throughout Maricopa County that work collectively to market the region, and that's nationally and internationally, and also working with the Arizona Commerce Authority, the governor's office, to make sure that we're working to market the state. Some folks may know Arizona, some may know Phoenix metro area, but they may not know Scottsdale as a place to grow their business. So it's important that we're strategic in our initiatives, not just looking at Scottsdale. As I mentioned, we have target industries, but we also have targeted markets that we have seen through our strategic planning efforts and through growth that we're seeing nationally, internationally, that we focus on. And those are proactive. And I would say that this may sound obvious, but we haven't done a proactive target market visits since COVID-19. But generally speaking, we make an effort to go into our target markets at least 2 times per year. And those are Chicago, New York, and the San Francisco Bay Area. And obviously we work with any business that's in our target industry base that's looking at Scottsdale. But these are markets that we proactively are going into, doing targeted messages on an ongoing basis, developing relationships with companies, with site selectors, commercial brokers on an ongoing basis. And then finally, to promote Scottsdale's brand, it's staying top of mind. So when companies and talent are looking at expanding, looking at relocating, we need to make sure that we're top of mind. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of communities out there that today are trying to drive new business and grow their business in their communities, just like Scottsdale. So we're competing in a very a robust economy, in the sense that we're trying to make sure that we're staying on top of mind. And so we're constantly promoting our brand. So a certain percentage of what we do is ongoing marketing. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, growing our current Scottsdale businesses is important, because such a large percentage of our growth and new jobs comes from businesses that are here in our community and growing. And we do that through a variety of approaches, and these are just 3 of the top. But, we try and meet with 100 to 130 businesses per year, and those are preferably face-to-face. Now we're conducting those virtually, but those are meant to make sure that we're staying in touch with our businesses. Once they locate here, we don't go out and just cut the ribbon and say, we wish you the best of luck and thank you for being part of Scottsdale. We need to make sure that we're constantly talking about how are they doing, how are their labor issues going? Are they finding issues and they want us to target certain labor markets to help them grow? Are there certain suppliers they want us to encourage to be a part of our economy? Are there competitors that they want to see us look at? So things that the city can do, and there's certain things the city cannot do, we need to make sure that we're identifying those, and being personalized and making sure that we're meeting with our companies is critical. We can only do so much. We're a small team of 6 when we're fully staffed. And so we have 1 individual that is dedicated full-time to business retention and expansion. So that is 130 meetings per year is an aggressive, but it's an important goal. Providing research and data. Not all of our companies have the ability to do some of the research they need to find out where their market segment is growing, where they need to do some more targeted marketing. And so we provide a lot of research and assistance through software that we on an annual basis have licensing for in the city of Scottsdale that would be cost prohibitive for individuals or companies to do at their own. So that's important that we continue to offer that and be a research arm for some of our smaller businesses, and to help build awareness and making sure that Scottsdale is known for top talent around the country and around the world. So businesses can grow, but talent is going to continue to drive a lot of those decisions, which I'll underscore here in a second. Our next slide. Workforce is by far the number one reason for business relocation. I would say that for some of us, when we go back maybe 10, maybe even to the old ages and say 15 years ago, when folks got out of college, when someone talked to them about what are you going to do for work, one of the first things they would say is, I need to move to such and such. Because I'm going to apply for a position, at such and such company. Now we know that folks that are graduating from college, one of the first things they say is they want to go live in a really cool, hip place, and they already know where that cool, hip place is. And those are driving company relocation decisions. And those cool, hip places, generally speaking, are Nashville. Certain cities within Colorado, Austin, certain cities within the Bay Area, predominantly San Francisco. There's certain cities that have that cool it factor, and I'm a little biased, but I'm a little proud to say too that I think Scottsdale fits within that. But companies are chasing labor. So we need to make sure that we are not only just attracting companies, but we are growing our labor market, because if we bring the labor here and we assure companies that their growth lines up with the talent that is moving into Scottsdale, or we're trying to attract a company to locate to Scottsdale, one of the first questions they ask is, do you have the labor I need to be successful? And if we're able to address that, then we're able to move on to other things like the real estate availability, cost of real estate, cost of operating, and taxes. But those things aren't even talked about if we can't get past the labor. So to that point, we have a job board. We develop relocation guides. We partner with our top industries and our top employers and go to job fairs. To make sure we're going into markets and we're standing side by side some of our top companies and say, Scottsdale is a place where you should consider relocating to. So constantly driving those talent decisions. Next slide. Scottsdale.jobs is a job board just for Scottsdale employers. So obviously there's a lot of job boards out there that are privately held and managed. This is just for Scottsdale. It's free, just for Scottsdale-based employers and for folks who are looking for Scottsdale jobs. We typically have more than 300 jobs posted at a time. That fluctuates based on what's happening in the economy. And we do a great deal of job promotion and through social media. Social media drives a lot of the younger generation messaging and the job acquisition. So we make sure that we're using social media on a weekly basis. We're pushing out job availability and company hirings. Next slide. These are just some facts that some folks aren't aware of, and we make sure that we talk about it whenever we talk about what economic impact has. We're a AAA bonded rated community. That may resonate with some more than others, but companies want to make sure they're going to be a part of a financially stable community, and that I think is becoming more and more important. 21% of Arizona headquarters are located in Scottsdale. A lot of people say, I had no idea. Scottsdale is known for being a resort community. I know that they've got some really big companies that were grown here, started here and grown here, but they had no idea that 21% of Arizona headquarters are actually in Scottsdale. We have a very high resident attainment for a bachelor degree or higher. And then 1/3 of our community is the McDowell Sonoran Preserve, the largest preserve in any community that I'm aware of, actually in the country. Next slide. So this is just give you a glimpse into some of our vacancy rates. These are a lot of times leading indicators of what we're seeing in the business area in terms of real estate. Obviously, things are changing quite a bit. So we have two comparisons here for Scottsdale compared to Metro Phoenix, and then we break that down by retail, office, and industrial. And this is from August of this year. So just last month, a couple weeks ago, these numbers are very fresh. Retail, we typically are pretty healthy. We're at 6.6%, very close to the Metro Phoenix area. Office, just under 12%, and that's pretty close to Metro Phoenix. I will say that our vacancy rates about a year ago were about almost 2.5% lower. Unfortunately, I think that number is going to go up based on what's happening with COVID-19 and companies really evaluating what does the future of their office footprint mean. We've all experienced firsthand that we don't need to be sitting in office, and companies are trying to manage what that looks like. There are companies that are also saying they're going to get back to traditional offices. So we all saw companies that were going to the open floor plans. My department, Econ development, we did that. We created an open work collaborative work environment, and so nobody has an open or a closed private office. And so even government was starting to do that, but companies are starting to say, once we're able to come back, we might need to go to private offices so we can control airflow, we can clean the air better. And so we might see some companies go actually to a larger footprint. Industrial, we don't have a lot of industrial in Scottsdale. So why 3.8% looks impressive, this because in great part because we don't have a lot of availability. And then in terms of the lease per square foot, I think Scottsdale is not necessarily known to be the best value in terms of per square foot cost. But we tend to be very competitive in that area. Retail, 26. Metro Phoenix is lower at 19. For office, we're pretty close. 28 isn't too far off the Metro. Industrial, a little bit higher. But again, it goes back to supply and demand. We don't have much supply, so obviously our costs are going to be a little bit higher for what we do have compared to just about a little over $8 a foot for Metro Phoenix area. Next slide, please. This is just a sampling of our top employers. Honor Health at the top end, and then GoDaddy is lower. This is the top 8 that we have in Scottsdale right now. Next slide. And then just a real quick glimpse. We have to have availability of new office products coming online and redevelopment. And so these are projects that we're watching very carefully. That when we market. And do messaging around the country, and we talk to potential companies that are relocating or completely expanding, or companies that are in Scottsdale, they're saying we need to grow. We're constantly marketing and advertising and trying to sell properties that obviously this city doesn't own. So we act as commercial brokers in a lot of sense that we talk about the projects, we talk about square footage, we talk about comparisons to other real estate that's available in the Metro Phoenix area. And a lot of times we'll do comparisons. If they say, hey, we're thinking of going to Nashville versus Scottsdale, sell me on the differences and advantages. We'll talk about a lot of the distinct advantages Scottsdale has, but we'll talk about projects. This is Nationwide Realty Investors. They purchased 134 acres of state land known as Crossroads East to develop Cavison, which is going to be a mixed-use project. You've probably all seen how quickly they're coming out of the ground, and they're in their very first phase. So they've got 3 more subsequent phases coming up. Next slide. One Scottsdale, which is another office development that is mixed use north of the former Hank building, which is now known as the Illume building, off 101 and Scottsdale Road. It's got a lot of really attractive office space that's coming up online. Next slide. Marquee was approved in Old Town. 280,000 square feet. Much needed office space in Old Town. What we see particularly from companies in the Bay Area, Bay Area real estate hovers around anywhere from about $75 to $85 a square foot. compared to our probably most expensive real estate that we have in Scottsdale commercial is going for around 40, maybe on the top end, 42 bucks a foot, not to mention the cost of living in the Bay Area. But they want to make sure that they're still operating in what their employees are used to, what their company culture is used to. So they want to be in an urban environment. So they come and they talk about downtown Scottsdale. Most companies say this is where we want to be. We've had a limited supply of office space. So this is a much needed product that we're looking forward to them breaking ground and bringing that online, hopefully soon. Next slide. Honor Health broke ground at Neuroscience Institute. That's 120,000 square feet. As I mentioned, biolife sciences and healthcare is one of our target industries. So this is a welcomed addition to Old Town and to our biolife science industry. Next slide. Sky Song is building 6 at 340,000 square feet. Sky Song continues to dominate McDowell corridor. And will until they're at build out. They obviously it's important to the city. But not only is it McDowell a critical revitalization area for the city of Scottsdale and the city council. As mentioned, it's a key employment corridor, and the city of Scottsdale owns the property on which Sky Song was developed. So it continues to be a very worthwhile investment for the city. Next slide. Papago Plaza right across the street. I grew up in South Scottsdale, and so those of you who remember, every few years Papago Plaza would get a new shade of pink, and so this is a really good opportunity to re-envision what Papago Plaza is and bring on mixed use and some retail. So this is exciting. You've all probably driven by lately. Take a drive by and see the progress they're making. Next slide. Real quick, these are some of the programs we offer in terms of business support. The job board we talked about. We work with development services and permitting. We're within the planning department, so we work very closely. We're working with the company to make sure they know exactly within the planning department the process and who to work with. And on large scale projects, for instance, Cavison and some other, where they come in and say that time is of the essence in order for them to meet their development goals. We need to make sure that we look at what expediting might mean. We have e-newsletter that we push out, a key updated information. We have a size up tool that's on our website. Going back to, again, how do some of the smaller companies that don't have a lot of resources for research, how do they look at developing some of their marketing and their advertising and looking at real estate options? They can go to the city's website, to our True Scottsdale website, and use a tool that allows them to look at their specific company, their area, and do some very customized research that almost points to and develops for them a business plan. And obviously working with companies on some of the traditional, you see Zillow Group here, who opened up in the Galleria, making sure we're working with them and celebrating them coming into our community. Next slide. So in terms of supporting the general plan, as I mentioned early on, obviously, it's important that we work within and we have support through the general plan and what we do for economic development. I mentioned that we are working under the city's current economic development plan that was approved in 2015. We started in February, actually, to go through a competitive process to bring on the assistance of a consultant to work with us to develop this plan. And then it was in March when we realized what was happening with the pandemic. And it actually, we looked at it as a little bit of a blessing in disguise, in that we were already working to update the strategic plan that quickly pivoted into not just a strategic plan, but a recovery plan. And so we were a couple months ahead of the process, worked through March and April to do an international competitive search for a consultant, again, to assist us with that, and developed an internal team that looked at and brought, what would make the most sense. Long range planning, Aaron Perot is part of our team and keeps us on task. And that was very intentional, because we wanted to make sure that we're weaving through the general plan and through our strategic planning economic development elements that complement each other and have a lot of crossover. We need to continue to diversify Scottsdale's economy by focusing on target industries. I do not think it's good enough anymore to say that is a mission statement. we have to make sure that we're actually driving policy that fits within that vision statement. How do we do that? And so the strategic plan that we're updating now, we hired a consultant named Residence in first week of June. And so we are in our third month of doing a lot of data analysis, doing a lot of peer city review, a lot of competitor city review. We have a stakeholder community stakeholder community group that is advising us, as made up of community leaders and business owners throughout the community. We are doing a tremendous amount of stakeholder involvement. We have done 10 stakeholder engagements that over the past month and a half with almost 100 participants. Again, these are business owners, these are community group leaders. We're currently finishing that up over the next month and a half. And the goal would be to have a draft plan by the end of November. And this plan will go to the new city council in the first quarter of the calendar year. So sometime before April. And we want to make sure that we have a strategic plan that's in place in draft form. The current council is engaged in the development of that strategic plan. All of the current council candidates and mayoral candidates are also invited to participate and are very involved in the development of that plan. So by the time it goes to council, sometime after the first of the year, after the new council is seated, everybody that on the current council and as well as the community will have been involved in the development of that process. We need to continue to look at focused talent attraction initiatives and the development of Crossroads East. That is our only availability of large parcels that can be developed. Aside from Cavison, there's been some other recent developments. There's a couple of state land parcels. There's actually an auction this Thursday for 74 acres on the southeast corner of the 101 in Hayden. The city council approved a development agreement for public infrastructure reimbursement with Axon Enterprises on August 25th, should Axon be the successful bidder. At Thursday's auction, the auction is open and competitive, so anybody who shows up that has the required materials and funding in place can bid on the land. So we'll know on Thursday afternoon who secured the land. But this really is the beginning of a lot more development that we need to see in thoughtful and strategic and deliberate development in Crossroads East. The current strategic plan calls for what we like to see as 2 Southwest regional headquarters based in Crossroads East. If Axon actually secures the land and the development agreement goes into place, we actually will have achieved that between Nationwide Insurance, which is in Crossroads, in Cavison, and then Axon would be their national headquarters, actually their international headquarters. We believe that there's capacity for at least one more national headquarters and maybe 2 more Southwest regional headquarters within Crossroads East. And then we need to continue to promote the development and targeted employment areas of Airpark downtown in the McDowell Road. Next slide. I believe that was the last slide. So that is a really quick overview. I apologize for going through that so quickly, but I want to make sure I provide enough time for any Q&A that I can participate in. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob, very much for the presentation, as well as your review of the Innovation and Prosperity chapter, economic vitality element. Well, I'm now opening it up for any questions of Rob. I see a hand raised by Committee Member Bernowski.
Yes. Hi, Rob. Larry Berdusky. Thanks for the great presentation. Just had a question regarding, you talked a little bit about COVID and with the working on the general plan, it's pretty hard to factor that in. But we know it's going to have an impact. Industries are going to change, workforces are going to change, people's habits, shopping, et cetera, are going to change. How are you considering that in your economic planning?
Yes, committee member. I think in a couple different ways. One is that we're shortening our horizon for our strategic plan and our recovery plan. As I mentioned, the current plan that we're operating under is a 5-year plan. This one is going to have a maximum of 3 years, and that is to account for when I say the ever-changing world, it's actually changing by the week right now. I anticipate that, and we all hope, fingers crossed, that things will, won't evolve that quickly in the future. But we know that there's going to be a post-COVID reality with respect to economic development, that things like office space are off. I was driving. Actually, I was coming back from Mesa Gateway Airport yesterday, so it was actually on the 202. And I was driving by some office buildings that were looked like they were half built. And so I said to my passenger, I said, boy, I'll bet you that those folks that are building that wish they can convert to multifamily or some sort of retail right now, because office is really in a state of flux right now. And so we need to be able to pivot on that and know that we are going to have some higher vacancy rates. We're going to see some office maybe converted to what maybe more in alignment with what's happening to our economy. And the other is with respect to talent attraction. The past 4 to 5 months have shown that you don't have to live in the community and that you're working for, the company. You can be on the other side of the world and still be working for the same company. And so our talent attraction initiatives are changing too. Well, whereas before we said, we think this is a great place for you to live, and we talked about quality of life and the availability of jobs within our community. We're pivoting to say that you don't, you can live here and be part of our quality of life, but there are jobs around the country that you can be a part of, but they don't actually have to be located in the Phoenix Metro, Scottsdale, or even the state of Arizona. So those are just a couple examples. I think that one of the most strong takeaways from our recovery planning is that we're going to have to continue to adjust. So while we look to have a plan adopted by the City Council in the spring, and it has a shorter time frame of 3 years, we are going to look at constant checks of every 12 months to look at, have there been some emerging economic development approaches that we need to incorporate, and quickly, to make sure that we're competitive, because we don't want to be stagnant. And I say this with a great deal of love and admiration for Scottsdale, having lived here and grown up here since I was 4 years old, and have been a part of this organization for almost 30 years. We cannot rest on our laurels. We are one of the greatest communities in the world, but that doesn't mean we can't stop. We have to make sure we're still innovative, and we're aggressive, and we're competitive, and that means we have to constantly be looking at things like the general plan, looking at how do we incorporate our economic development strategies to make sure that competitors locally and nationally see us as a place where we're continued to be a place for businesses to grow.
Thank you. I see a hand raised by committee member Indigoyan.
Hey, how are you? This is Aloy Indigoyan. I just wanted to say appreciate all the insights, Rob, and just wanted to speak a bit more and make a couple of comments about sort of the future of the workforce. So I'm actually in the offices and there were actually a couple of the companies that you were highlighted on some of those slides have offices in here. I have not seen anybody in those offices now in the past few months. I do want to say, since I moved here from the West Coast a couple of years ago, and since I started working out of a shared working space, there was a ton of activity here pre-COVID. Obviously, everything has slowed down significantly since then. I do want to say, as far as like what I've been seeing as far as people who are coming in, people who aren't coming in, and so on and so forth, I'm seeing a lot of companies try to optimize their space now by either having a couple of spots in a shared working space where they still have the opportunity to come in and sort of hang out in a Starbucks environment, I guess I would say, but still have that option to have people work from home, have people be able to be spread out, because again, it is not that crowded here right now. I imagine just sort of the future of sort of how this specific building is going to look and how some of these other buildings are going to look in the future. I imagine that it'd be some sort of combination of either, a shared work environment where if people want to come in half the time during the week and then some people want to stay home and then vice versa. from that side of things. But I just wanted to add those comments as far as what I'm seeing on the ground. It's been very empty here the last couple of months. I've talked to a couple of the people at some of the offices who have come in. They mentioned that there will be no sort of new set plans until the end of this year, early into next year, but some of those plans could eventually have some of them working in a shared work environment from that side of things too.
Thank you for the comment, committee member. Was there any additional questions for Rob Millar at this time? Otherwise, we will begin review of the Innovation and Prosperity chapter. I see one hand raised by committee member Bernowski.
Yeah, just a quick question, Rob, kind of off topic, but the Cabazon you talked about, has there been any slowdown in the construction because of COVID that you can tell?
Committee member, there really hasn't. I mean, that's, with Nationwide, they did announce about 2 months ago that nationally they were going to reduce their in-office footprint by 50%. But they were very specific to say that for their office here, their Southwest headquarters, they were not going to introduce those reductions. So they were going to continue to go back to full staffing when they could. They do have a full service hotel that is planned that has been delayed for the foreseeable future. And obviously there's going to be a lot of changes with the tourism market. They have a multifamily that they're still scheduling to be on target. They also have 2 spec offices. Actually, they start off as 2 spec. One has been, both of them 150,000 square feet. One has been fully leased by Choice Hotels, and the other one is considered spec at this point, but they do have some letters of interest that are out, and then they have their parking structure in place. So I would guess that they're going to finish their phase 1 fully before they start embarking on the other 3 phases. Just because there's a lot of unknowns at this point, but at this point, we're hoping that they continue to move forward at the pace that they're set for.
Thank you.
Thank you. At this point in time, we'll be starting the review of the Innovation and Prosperity chapter. We'll just wait a moment while Taylor pulls that up. All right, so just for the sake of potentially viewers at home as well as committee members in attendance this evening, the green text as a reminder on the screen is text that was provided by the city's technical advisory committee. And on the pages that follow, you'll see a good number of the text is crossed out in green, which was created as a result of the new drafted tourism element that we will be reviewing following this item. The text in red was provided by citizen involvement that took place between 2014 and current. And so with respect to page 222, was there any additional comments created to that or comments that are, I guess, not in support? Please raise your hand now. I see hand raised by committee member Shimakubo.
Thank you. The comment about while tourism is more of a cyclical industry, I wondered if that also should be a seasonal industry. I wasn't sure of the purpose of that comment. I think it's both. So I would suggest we put both of them in.
Thank you for the comment. Was there any additional comments to page 222? Notably, I will say that the comment in red was provided by our marketing arm that partners with the city, and that is Experience Scottsdale. And they also reviewed that specific to tourism. So the proposal currently is to add the words seasonal and cyclical industry to page 222. Could I see hands of support? Please raise your hand. I see hands of support, please raise your hand at this point in time. Thank you. We do have consensus on page 222, so we'll move on. Moving on to page 223. Was there any additional comments to 223? Please raise your hand now so we can speak to them. Seeing none, we will incorporate the text changes as where they're presented in green on the screen. Moving on to page 224. Again, notably for committee members as well as the public watching at home, the tourism element is a new element under the Innovation and Prosperity chapter, which will be reviewed following this item. But with respect to the items on screen before you, is there any additional changes at this point in time? Please raise your hand now. Seeing none, we'll move on to page 225. With regard to comments received by Citizen Review Committee members, we had a question by Committee Member Bernowski asking about the COVID pandemic and its effect on Scottsdale business community. Committee Member Bernowski, if you feel like your question hasn't been yet addressed by Director Millar's presentation and or his responses to the questions, would you like to please speak to it now? Please raise your hand.
No, it looks fine. Rob gave a good answer that basically you're going to shorten planning cycles to be more adaptive to the changes we don't know about yet.
Yes, great. Thank you very much, Committee Member Bernowski. We also had a note by Committee Member Bernowski that we update and review all the photo in here that's presented on page 225, notably for the committee as well as public at home. We'll be reviewing all those photos later when we've completed review of the plan. Are there any additional comments to page 225? Please raise your hand now. Seeing none, we'll move on to page 226. With respect to the items on page 226, Goal EV1 and its associated policies move to the new tourism element that we'll be reviewing next. And again, this was requested at the May 18th meeting of the CRC. At this point in time, we will move on to page 227 and note that the same has been done to page 227. Moving on to page 228. There was a comment submitted by Committee Member Bernowski that perhaps there may have been missing words to bullet number 2 under EV 1.1. In review of that comment, I just want to direct the committee as well as the public at home to read bullet number 2 as well as all bullets associated there in that color block. They need to be read together with EV 1.1. So in this regard, it would mean that EV 1.1 sub-bullet 2 would read as follows: direct economic growth and change through the implementation and regular update of economic and tourism development strategy plans that support Scottsdale's competitive strengths and are compatible with Scottsdale's lifestyle. Committee Member Bernowski, would you like to make comment to your addition of text in consideration of that comment, or are you okay with it as read?
I'm fine with it as read. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Were there any additional comments to page 228? Please raise your hand at this point in time. Seeing none, we'll move on to page 229. 229 had a comment by Committee Member Bernowski to replace the word support with enhance to EV 2.3. Committee Member Bernowski, would you like to speak to that, please?
Well, I just thought that support seemed to be kind of weak, and that whatever we might do to encourage enhancement of these accessible and effective education stuff maybe add a little more oomph to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see a hand raised by Committee Member Shimakubo.
Thank you. The opening comment, provide diverse economic activities. I didn't really understand what that was. So I wondered if this was supposed to mean something to the effect of provide diverse industry sectors or life cycle options, because these are talking about startup as well as different sectors. So I would suggest we take that economic activities because it's confusing in my opinion.
Thank you for the comment, Committee Member Shimakubo. Were there any additional comments to page 229 on the screen before you? I see a hand raised by Committee Member Johnson.
Can you just restate what the other committee member suggested? Is it simply delete economic activities? Is that what she's suggesting?
My understanding, Committee Member Johnson, is to replace economic activities with industries or economic industries or sectors. Is that correct, Committee Member Shimakubo?
Yes, thank you.
I might lean into Director Millar, who's still in attendance, to perhaps opine on this if you have any suggestions.
Adam, can you, I'm not sure if I understood the question.
Sure. The question was, is the intent of goal EV 2, so it's on the top of the screen before you, was it, Committee Member Shimakubo is uncertain to the term economic activities and its intent, and perhaps replacing it with economic industries or sectors.
Yeah, no, I believe that economic activities is more descriptive of, the various activities that support, and of that is industries and sectors. So activities is more of a broader term that we use to describe those things that drive industries and sectors.
Thank you. I see a hand raised still by Committee Member Johnson. All right, hands down. Committee Member Shimakubo, is Director Millar's response sufficient at this point in time?
Yes, as long as, yes, everybody understands what that means. Yes, I'm fine with leaving it. It was just confusing to me. Thank you.
Thank you. I got a hand raised by Committee Member Indigoyan.
I just want to speak to the EV 2.2, strengthen community partnerships with educational institutions to grow and support high-value startup business research and other entrepreneurial opportunities. I'd like to potentially just raise removing the term educational. It might not just be educational institutions that we're partnering with. It could be large companies that are being out here from a Scottsdale side of things. It can also very well be educational institutions as well, but I just wanted to have a conversation about that.
Thank you, Committee Member Indigoyan. I see a hand raised by Committee Member Shimakubo.
Yes, I'd like to address 2.3 and change the end of that sentence. It says in job training, comma, and remove from preschool through higher education and make it opportunities at all levels. So it would read job training opportunities at all levels, because that reference to preschool was a little odd.
Thank you very much for the comment. Were there any additional comments at this point in time? I'm going to do my best to try and respond to some of the, I need to get agreement on some of the suggestions that were made. Notably, Committee Member Indigoyan suggested removing the term educational and keeping it more broadly represented as institutions. And the last speaker had suggested removing from preschool through higher education to read as follows. And I guess this would include incorporating Committee Members Bernowski's modification to say enhance accessible and effective education and job training opportunities at all levels, period. Could I see hands of support for those comments as read into our meeting? Thank you very much. It appears we do have consensus on those comments, and so we'll move on to page 230. Okay. With respect to 230 on the screen before you, we've got, I guess let me open it up by asking, were there any additional comments to page 230? Committee Member Yakovo. Okay. Any additional comments to page 230, please raise your hand. What we'll do is there were comments presented in red that were provided by Scottsdale Environmental Advisory Commission members. Notably, there was text additions to goal EV3, EV 3.1, EV 3.5, EV 3.6, 3.7, and 3.8. Taylor, if you would, please go to that portion of our page. We just wanted to bring to the attention, I guess, what staff had noticed by those public comments that were submitted was that the goal's intent for EV3 is to manage land uses in neighborhoods, and the proposed language changes the intent. Additionally, it also brings some level of redundancy that was intended to be removed by the 2014 task force efforts, in that, there are lots of topics that could be repeated throughout the plan, throughout many different goals. And so part of what the Citizen Review Committee's tasked with is to understand if this brings an effective change that's not yet been mentioned in the plan or is just blatantly missing. And so in review of what's being changed by these text additions, we just wanted to bring to the attention that there's still yet a couple chapters that have yet to be reviewed by the committee with respect to land use and character and design. But with the addition of both the environment to goal EV3, goal LU5 promotes land use patterns that conserve resources, including land, clean air, water, and energy. Additionally, policy CD 1.1 from the character and design element states that new and revitalized development should respond to the regional, citywide, and neighborhood context in terms of, and then there's subsequently 11 bullets. 2 of those bullets respond to the environment, being that development respond to Scottsdale's southwestern Sonoran desert characteristics such as climate, native plants, topography, and culture, and the impacts on and sensitive to the natural environment. With that said, could I ask for a committee member to, consider this analysis and address those items that are noted with a circle of yellow on the screen before you to goal EV3, EV 3.5, and EV 3.6, with the idea that would the committee like to create redundancy, and or is this an effective change that the committee members would like to see at this point in time? Could I see a hand raised for a committee member to speak to that, please? Committee member Jones.
Yeah, Adam, thank you for going back and finding those other goals. I agree that we don't need the red circled verbiage in the EV based on what you just stated. So I recommend removing them.
Thank you very much, Committee Member Jones. With that recommendation, there was some additional text in red that seemed, to broadly coincide with other comments that we've received. And so, Committee Member Jones, since I asked and you responded, could I ask you to address the other items in red that are on the screen before you?
Yeah, I agree. We don't need those either. How's that?
Thank you for the comments. Could I ask for additional comments from members of the committee at this time? Committee Member Johnson.
Just to clarify, we're suggesting everything in red on this page be deleted. Is that what we're saying at this moment?
Committee Member Johnson, that seemed to be Committee Member Jones' suggestion. In the analysis on the screen before you, again, there seemed to be redundancy perhaps in those items outlined in yellow, yet the ones that are not outlined in yellow but have a text color of red, again, seem to coincide with similar comments that we've received. So it's not that staff's responding to those, it's just staff's responding to those items that are circled in yellow.
Yeah, thanks for the clarification. I don't think that the items not circled in red are extraneous or redundant. So I get your point about redundancy. So That's my point of view.
Thank you for that. And so Committee Member Johnson, would you be okay with, not including and I guess supporting Committee Member Jones and not including those items circled in yellow?
I mean, I think I'm representing my whole commission here. So it'd be nice to give some nod to the commission's work and thinking. I think item 3.6 is probably, I would just suggest that we keep environmental and in item 3.6. I'm fine with the rest. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I ask for additional comments from the committee at this time? Committee Member Jones.
Then I'll make a recommendation that we remove everything in red other than what Committee Member Johnson mentioned, which is leaving the 3.6 verbiage in. Thank you.
Thank you. So it sounds like the proposal with respect to that language that's text colored in red is to keep 3.6 as proposed by this Environmental Advisory Committee members' comment and remove all other text in red. Committee Member Johnson, are you in support of that?
Yes.
Okay. So let's just try and take this piecemeal a little bit. With respect to that proposal, could I see a hands of support at this point in time? Okay, so we do have consensus on that item. We did have one outstanding additional item here on page 230, which was Committee Member Bernowski's comment, why was this goal EV 4.6 removed from this section and moved to the tourism section? The airport and air park are a major economic driver across all of the local and state economy, not just tourism. Seems that this is a better fit in this section. I'll ask my colleague, Taylor Reynolds, if you could pull up that slide. We do have a response to that. Taylor, would you like to go over that?
Yes, sure. I was having trouble unmuting myself. So we did review both this element and tourism, and this goal seemed like this policy seemed like a better fit in the new tourism element. As we did go back and review the Greater Air Park Character Area Plan, it has several specific goals and policies to maintaining the air park specifically as an economic engine within the city. So we felt it was a better fit to move it to the tourism element, but certainly it could be kept here or it could be moved, or we could try and create a policy in both spots as well.
I see a hand raised by Committee Member Dodd and then Jones. Go ahead, Committee Member Dodd.
Yeah, it's down.
Okay, thank you. Committee Member Jones.
I agree with Committee Member Bernarski that it should be in the economic development section and not the tourism section. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee Member Bernarski, would you like to respond to that at this time?
Yes, I agree with Committee Member Jones that, again, this is something, it seemed to be something that's, it just seemed to me that this was pigeonholing the Greater Air Park area in just tourism when it's responsible for a whole bunch of other related employment and other multiplier benefits that go with the employment in the surrounding air park.
Thank you very much. Can I see a hands of support for keeping policy EV 4.6 within the economic vitality element at this point in time? Thank you. We do have hands of support and consensus on page 230. And we'll move on to page 231. We had, again, text proposed for the addition of or modification to EV 4.6 from members of Scottsdale Environmental Advisory Commission and to 4.7. We also have a question from committee member Bernowski relating to EV 4.8, asking for background on the city's high performance organization and work culture. What specifically is being referred to here? In review of that question, staff reread the policy and recognize that it is somewhat city speak, if you will, but that policy is intended to speak directly to City Council's strategic plan and its goals and priorities. And so perhaps Committee Member Bernowski, if you think this is a better definition of such, it would be to replace or have policy EV 4.8 read as follows: invest in the city's high performing workforce to continue to provide a high level of services for community members and visitors. Committee Member Bernowski?
Yeah, that sounds very fine with me. That little clearing, like you say, it gets out of some city speak.
Great, thank you very much. With respect to that comment, and I guess the other comments provided in red as well, on page 231, could I see hands of support for page 231? Now with the amended EV 4.8. Thank you. It does appear we do have consensus on page 231. I see a hand raised by Committee Member Shimakubo.
Yes, thank you. I apologize. Is it possible to go back to page 222 real quickly? I realize I missed something and I would just like the group's thought about this. So on page 222, sentence number 2 in the first paragraph, it says that regionally competitive attracts businesses that employ our residents, provide essential services. And so just because of all the new language, like related to COVID, I think of essential services as, yes, healthcare, but like meat packing plants and grocery stores. And I wondered if really the intent here was to say value added services. So I could go either way, but I just think that verbiage, essential services, now has a whole different meaning in some cases.
Committee Member Shimakubo, could you direct us again to where that addition would be?
Yes, it's the first paragraph under introduction, and it's the second sentence. Scottsdale is regionally competitive and attracts businesses that employ our residents, provide essential services, and then supports educational opportunities. And I just suggest that that term essential services has a whole different meaning after COVID. And I believe that the intent here was value added services.
Thank you for the comment. I'll ask again, Director Millar, I guess if that language is supported.
Yes, committee members, that is, you're absolutely right. That those terms, essential services, is taken on a whole new meaning. But I do believe that your suggestion is more in alignment with the intent of that paragraph.
Thank you. I see a hand raised by Committee Member Yakovo. Looks like it just went down. At this point in time, could I ask for the inclusion of value added in the sentence mentioned by Committee Member Shimakubo? Please raise your hand now. Thank you. We do have consensus on that addition. And so we'll move on. So based on tonight's discussion, after reviewing and discussing, we'll be now asking for a motion to approve the incorporation of suggested legislative edits based on comments made by the public, city staff, and CRC members concerning Section 2, Innovation and Prosperity Chapter, Introduction and the Economic Vitality element of the draft 2035 General Plan, pages 223 to 229. Could I ask for a motion and then a second? Committee Member Dodd.
So moved.
Thank you. Could I ask for a second, please? Committee Member Eng.
Seconded.
Thank you. We will do a roll call vote at this point in time. Committee Member Bernowski.
Yes.
Thank you. Committee member Maraldi.
Yes.
Committee member Dodd.
Yes.
Committee member Eng.
Yes.
Committee member Yakovo.
I'm assuming that we're voting to accept all the changes, correct?
Correct.
That would be a no. And I'm only saying that because I didn't get a chance to voice my concern about removing essential services in favor of value add.
Oh, committee member Yakovo, I'd asked for your hand raised. Perhaps, I don't know if,
I didn't unmute fast enough.
oh, okay. Yeah, we already have consensus, so we'll move on. Committee member Johnson.
Yes.
Committee member Jones.
Yes.
Committee member Newman.
Yes.
Committee member Raymond.
Yes.
Committee member Scarborough. Committee member Scarborough. All right, committee member Schweiger.
Yes.
Thank you. Committee member Indigoyen.
Yes.
Thank you. Committee member Shimakubo.
Yes.
Thank you. Committee member Yakovo, just for the sake of having your comment heard, did you want to speak to that language change to page 222? Committee member Yakovo, if you're speaking, you're muted. Okay. We'll have one final call for item 4 for a vote by committee member Scarborough. Okay, we'll move on to item 5. And again,
Sorry about that. Yes, I apologize.
Oh, thank you very much, committee member Scarborough. We all, again, staff would like to recognize Director Millar's participation in the update process and his review, and appreciate your presentation this evening.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Moving on to item 5, and just for the sake of the committee's understanding, is we're still going to come back to item 3, but item 5 is kind of the dovetail to item 4, as it's the other part of the Innovation and Prosperity chapter. We'll be reviewing the tourism element. Taylor, next slide, please. We'll be confirming receipt of public comments submitted on this agenda item, review, discussion, and potentially approval of the incorporation of the suggested legislative edits based on comments made by the public, city staff, and CRC members. With respect to item 5, there are no comments that were submitted, and so nothing was provided to the committee. Taylor, while you're advancing, oh, perfect. Thank you very much. With respect to the language on the screen, again, for the benefit of the committee as well as folks that might be watching at home, the text on the screen that's in black was existing text that may have been within the Innovation and Prosperity chapter. I should say that was in the Innovation and Prosperity chapter heading and or economic vitality description. The green text was drafted by our tourism department as the technical advisory committee participant. And the red text was provided by our marketing arm of the tourism department, Experience Scottsdale. And so with respect to those text changes and modifications, this is a new element for the general plan. Can I ask for any comments to page 223, I'm sorry, 233, please raise your hand at this point in time. Seeing none, I'll ask, could I see hands of support for page 233 as presented on the screen before you? Thank you. We do have consensus on page 233, so we'll move on. Notably on tourism policy 1.1, this was a comment provided by, again, a member of Scottsdale's Environmental Advisory Commission to incorporate the words commitment to environmental stewardship. And the remaining text in red was provided by Experience Scottsdale, and the text in green provided by the city's tourism department. Could I ask for any hands for comments on page 234? Please raise your hand now. Seeing none, could I see hands of support to page 234? Please raise your hand now. Thank you. We do have consensus on page 234. Thank you. Moving on to page 235. There was some text addition to policy tourism T 1.6 by Scottsdale, a member of Scottsdale Environmental Advisory Commission. In review of that policy, staff perhaps thought that we could shorten the text to read as follows: preserve and enhance environmental, historical, and archaeological sites that support tourism, contribute to our city's unique identity and provide educational and cultural development opportunities for the community. There was also comments provided by members of SEAC for tourism 1.8 and 1.9. And I'll remind, based on the last action of the CRC, 1.10 will move back to the economic vitality element per the last action of the committee. Could I ask for, I guess, discussion of the amended 1.6 language at this point in time? Could I see a hand? I see a hand raised by Committee Member Newman.
Oh, my apologies.
No, it's okay. Could I see a hand raised? Could I see a committee member respond to the proposed text change to tourism 1.6 to read as follows: preserve and enhance environmental, historical, and archaeological sites that support tourism, contribute to our city's unique identity, and provide educational and cultural development opportunities for the community, period. Committee Member Johnson.
I'm in favor of that change. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I see hands of support for the remaining portion of the text found on page 235? Please raise your hand now.
Excuse me. Sorry, this is Janice Shimakubo. Are we just voting on 1.6 or the whole page?
Committee Member Shimakubo, it's the remaining portion of the page.
Okay, then I have one other request to add, a 1.13 to promote Scottsdale as the welcoming and inclusive community. Because there is one 2.5, but that talks about diversity and inclusivity of resorts in tourism businesses, but it never talks about the city itself. So I would like to suggest we add a 1.13. Thank you.
Thank you. Could you repeat that policy text addition, please?
Promote Scottsdale as a welcoming and inclusive community. And I know Experience Scottsdale's already trying to do that. So I thought it should be Scottsdale oriented versus this section 2 talks really about the resorts and businesses, not about our city.
Thank you. So we have a proposed addition of T 1.13 to read as follows: promote Scottsdale as a welcoming and inclusive community. Could I see hands of support for that addition as well as the remaining portions on the screen? Please raise your hand now. It appears we do have consensus on page 235 with that text addition, as well as those policies that were colored and discussed this evening.
Adam?
Yes.
I'm not sure that 1.13 actually goes with the goal. Did we compare it to the goal?
Thank you, Aaron.
So the policy should be supporting the goal that they're under. I guess it's broad enough that it could. Okay. I just want to make sure the policies make sense with the goals that they're supporting. So.
Thank you, Aaron, for the comment.
Sure.
Committee Member Shimakubo, are you finding that to be the case with your proposed addition?
Yes, that we will attract tourists from all over the world because we are a welcoming community and inclusive.
Thank you for that. So we do have completion of page 235 with consensus from the committee. Moving on to page 236. The text in red was provided by members of Scottsdale's Environmental Advisory Committee with the addition of T 3.9, promote environmental sustainability at events, attractions, and venues. Were there any additional changes to page 236 by members of the CRC? Could I ask that you raise your hand now? Seeing no hands raised, could I see hands raised for support of the legislative edits found on page 236 with the modifications in green as well as red on page 236? Thank you. It appears we do have consensus on page 236. Moving on to 237. This draft tourism and lodging map notes hotel locations within Scottsdale. Could I see hands of support for this page? Please raise your hand now. Thank you. We have consensus on page 237. At this point in time, we've completed review of the tourism element. I'd like to ask, because we've reviewed and discussed it, now I'm asking for a motion to potentially approve the incorporation of the suggested legislative edits based on comments made by the public, city staff, and CRC members concerning the draft tourism element. Committee Member Johnson.
So moved.
Thank you. Could I ask for a second, please? Committee Member Newman.
I would second the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll do a roll call vote. Committee Member Bernowski.
Yes.
Thank you. Committee Member Maraldi.
Yes.
Committee Member Dodd.
Yes.
Committee Member Eng.
Yes.
Committee Member Yakovo.
Yes.
Thank you. Committee Member Johnson.
Yes, thank you.
Committee Member Jones.
Yes.
Thank you. Committee Member Newman.
Yes.
Thank you. Committee Member Raymond.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Committee Member Scarborough.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Committee Member Schweiger.
Yes.
Thank you. Committee Member Indigoyan.
Yes.
Thank you. Committee Member Shimikubo.
Yes.
Thank you. That completes item 5. We've got just one item left on the agenda, which was item 3, and we hope we can get through this and appreciate you all sticking through this. Item 3 are the follow-up items that were discussed as previous items of review by the Citizen Review Committee. This item will go over, Taylor, next slide, please. We'll be confirming receipt of the public comments submitted on this agenda item. We'll also be reviewing, discussing, and potentially approving these legislative edits based on comments made by the public, city staff, and CRC members. With respects to public comments that have been received, we did receive one public comment by Miss Elise McMahon that was sent to you all. Staff did receive it just at 4 o'clock. And so we will do our best to incorporate the presentation of those comments as we make our way through these follow-up items, and we'll provide an opportunity for the committee to consider those comments at that time. So with respect to this item 3, this will be covering section 1, preface, the prologue, vision and values, vision statement, community aspirations, or community values, and the foundation of the vision, and the introduction, which includes the purpose of the general plan and community profile. Section 2 chapters will include character and culture chapter, only the chapter introduction of the arts, culture, and creative community element, sustainability and environment chapter, which includes open space, environmental planning, conservation, water resources, and energy elements, the collaboration and engagement chapter, which includes the community involvement element, the community well-being chapter, which includes the healthy community, housing, recreation, and safety elements, and the connectivity chapter, which includes circulation and bicycling elements. These comments that will be presented on the screen incorporate a series of different legislative colored texts that, again, for the benefit of the CRC members and folks that are watching at home, text in blue is comment that was received by the Citizen Review Committee. Text in green were comments that were provided by City Staff Technical Advisory Committee input. Comments in red are citizen outreach comments gathered between 2014 and current. And the new the connotation of new is content that was created during the GP task force process. The content that's blue but highlighted in yellow are those follow-up items that we'll be reviewing specifically. Moving on. So our first follow-up item is found on page 4, which has to do, and again, for the benefit of folks watching at home or even members of the Citizen Review Committee members, these items in yellow, highlighted in yellow, have a reference to the previous discussion of the Citizen Review Committee members. And so with respect to this item was discussed at our May 18th, 2020 meeting, and minutes can be referenced for this item found on page 2 of those minutes. Notably for this item, this request from the Citizen Review Committee requested that there be acknowledgement to education and that we reorder neighborhoods to the beginning of the vision and not the latter end. And so with that said, were there any additional comments to page 4 on the screen before you? Please raise your hand now. Or if you believe that, I guess, let me ask, could I ask a committee member to speak to those changes and or if they're in support or would like to modify that, please raise your hand now. Seeing none, could I ask for hands of support for the proposed text change, being that this satisfies the bring back item for the Citizen Review Committee? Please raise your hand now. Thank you. We do have consensus on page 4. The next item for review is going to be found on page 12. This item was, again, the addition of the yellow text before you was to provide the word sustainable to this value as we renamed the environment chapter sustainable and environmental chapter. And so this chapter aligns with the community values and the way that it's written. We did receive a public comment relating to this proposed text change that was sent to you all. I see a hand raised by committee member Jones, but before I get to you, now that Taylor brought this up on screen, here's the rationale that was provided by Elisa McMahon with respect to that addition, and her request would be to lead the region in the stewardship and sustainable management of the Sonoran Desert environment and conservation of natural resources and open spaces for the visual, physical, and personal enrichment of everyone. I see a hand raised by committee member Jones and then Newman.
I was going to suggest that we don't need the word sustainable up there in blue and yellow. The wording down here by the citizen, I'm fine with removing the sustainable in the blue and putting it where she has it in the red. I don't think a sustainable is needed in this statement, but I'm okay with the red and not the blue.
Thank you, committee member Jones. I'd like to just remind, again, for the committee's sake and consideration, that the text in blue was text that was previously discussed by this committee. And as I recall, and I think likely committee member Johnson, who has his hands raised, will speak to, there was a desire to not preclude someone's opportunity to donate land to the city. Committee member Johnson.
That's right. We added donation. So I am in support of the sentence at the bottom here with the red sustainable, but I would like to have the word donation included back. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the comment, committee member Johnson. So we have a proposal to incorporate the text as read below, but now include the word donation to that proposed citizen comment. Could I see a hand? Could I see another hand raised for someone to respond to that proposal by committee member Johnson? I see committee member Jones, if you'd like to respond to that, and in your response, acknowledge, I guess, that in the proposal that's being made, preservation would be removed.
Correct. So I agree with committee member Johnson that the word donation should be used. I'm can't really talk and walk through that sentence and see where it belongs, but if staff could come up with some effective wording, I'm fine with adding in that last sentence, the red sustainable and the word donation.
Thank you. I think staff's going to, if you just bear with us, I think we're going to try and either work some proposed text into it, or we may bring this back as a follow-up item. I may.
So, Adam?
Yes, thank you, Erin.
This is Erin. It does, on item D, the citizen does recognize that there is other language in the open space element that covers acquisition, preservation, and donation of land specific to the preserve. We could certainly bring that back and show the commission where that's written, see if it satisfies the donation piece that they're looking for.
Committee Member Johnson.
Yeah, I was just reading that probably at the same time that she was. I like that comment. I'm hard pressed, as Committee Member Jones is, to find a place for the word donation. So 7.3 may cover it. I just want to make sure that the document does include the idea of donation of land. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee Member Jones.
So then I'll just make a motion that we use the red language in the bottom of the page and not the top in the blue.
Thank you. Could I see hands of support for that proposal? I see it appears we do have consensus on that. And so it would be to incorporate the language in the bottom of the screen and not that is in red. I'm sorry, red that is in blue. Sorry. I still see a hand up. A hand went down. Thank you. Next comment that we have has to do with page 19, Taylor. This had to do with the addition of providing a range of diversity and housing options for the community. This was just a request to include that language explicitly by members of the CRC. Could I see hands of support for that text addition? It appears we do have consensus on that addition. The next item that we had as a follow-up item was on page 46, which notably this item had to do with the removal of the words unspoiled portions of and avoiding land uses that as a result of it being a negative connotation in nature. And so that was a request of the CRC. Could I see hands of support for the now revised text? Please raise your hand now. Thank you. We do have consensus on that change. Next item for follow-up was on page 87, which had to do with promote a supportive environment for working artists to help expand the creative community within Scottsdale. And that second part of the sentence with the text addition was asked to qualify it. And so in a similar way as 5.1 and 5.2, could I see hands of support for that text addition? Thank you. We do see consensus on that item. The next item for follow-up was on page 105 with the addition of the term climate change to the introduction of the environmental planning element. I'll mention for the benefit of the committee, as well as the public and Scottsdale Environmental Advisory Commission, who has been integral in review of this term and how it's utilized within the plan. I'll mention that long-range planning staff has presented to the chair, vice chair, and CRC representative regarding this item. They've had discussion on the addition of climate change, and as you'll see on text that will come back through this item 3 on that's all text in red, we've received comments from Scottsdale's Environmental Advisory Commission and there wasn't any additional notable change to the term climate change with their addition. The approach in which climate change was presented back to the Scottsdale's Environmental Advisory Commission was that there are many ways in which the plan, both the 2001 and drafted 2035 plan, addresses ways in which the city can support goals that either adapt to or mitigate climate change. And so I just wanted to mention that for the benefit of that item as a follow-up item. And I'll ask, I see a hand raised by Committee Member Jones first, but if I could ask Committee Member Johnson just to, I guess, affirm the characterization of this item and how it's been treated with your commission.
Thanks, Adam. It has been extensively discussed. I appreciate your cooperation and your work on this. I believe this is the only place in the entire document where the words climate and change appear together. So I don't think it's asking too much to have those words appear together once in the document. I'm supportive of this. Thanks.
Thank you. I see a hand raised by Committee Member Jones.
Yeah, I don't agree with the word climate change, but I do agree with the red, which basically says something in that vernacular, and that's what the environmental planning element is to do. So I just recommend removing the words climate change. Thank you.
All right. With respect to the text in red, Taylor, if you would help me out, we did receive a public comment on, I believe it was the text in red and not that is in yellow. Is that correct, Taylor?
That is correct.
Okay, so at this point in time, we're only going to be looking at that text that's in yellow with the blue. And so I understood at this point in time both support for and against the term climate change. Why don't I try and approach it this way? Can I see hands of support for the addition of the words climate change as presented in that text language that's presented highlighted in yellow? Please raise your hand now. Thank you. We do have consensus on including climate change on page 105. And Committee Member Jones, and again, for members of the public that may be watching, we're going to come back through and do this red text as soon as we get done with the yellow highlighted text, so we'll come back to that. The next item that's highlighted in yellow was found on page 109. And this was proposed text that I believe came from Committee Member Johnson. Committee Member Johnson, in review of 4.9 and 4.10 on page 109, could I ask for you to respond to that because that request came from you initially?
Sure. It's simply the concept of zero waste, which is gaining traction in many communities around the country. And obviously the idea is to extend the life of landfills and reduce the amount of waste going to landfills. Thank you.
Thank you. With respect to those items highlighted in yellow, could I see a hand raised by Committee Member Jones.
Is zero waste defined? I think I understand the term, but is it defined somewhere else, or just asking? It's not an opinion, just asking the question.
Sure. Committee Member Jones, I don't believe it's a glossary item. If you think it might be helpful to add it as such, we can do so. But I don't believe it's in the glossary at current.
No, I'm fine with the verbiage. I just kind of was, I don't know how we ever get to zero waste, but I admire the goal. So I'll leave it as is.
Committee Member Johnson, I see hand raised.
Yeah, I think it's a terrific idea to add it to the glossary. So I would propose that to the staff if possible.
Committee Member Jones, we may, just because for the sake of time and review, we may look for CX or Scottsdale Environmental Advisory Commission's input on that glossary item.
Happy to help, sure.
Thank you. So with respect to 4.9 and 4.10, could I see hands of support for that addition? Please raise your hand now. Thank you. We do have consensus on those additions. page 110. We are only reviewing at this point in time the highlighted text, and we'll come back to the rest of the text on the screen. But for the text edition, this was brought up during the community mobility section, and it was asked that we incorporate concepts of low impact development and permeable pavement and curb openings be incorporated. This is where it seemed to be most appropriate. Taylor, did we have a comment from the citizen comment on this item as well?
I do not believe so.
Bear with me just a moment.
Oh, sorry. Yes, we did. I can bring it up right now.
Thank you. Committee member Moraldi, I still see a hand raised. I don't know if that was intended or not.
Sorry.
Oh, no problem. So the proposed alternative language, Taylor, if you could highlight it on the screen just so that it's clearer for members of the citizen review to review it. It would be to replace the language in EP 5.2 with increase the use of green infrastructure, including low impact development, stormwater management techniques, such as curb openings and permeable pavement. Could I ask for a committee member respond to that proposed text change? Committee member Johnson.
Well, this isn't my language, obviously. This came from a member of the public, but it seems like the only, and maybe I'm pointing out the obvious here, the only difference, I guess green infrastructure is now capitalized as a proper noun and moved to the beginning of the sentence. Is that, am I missing something, what the proposal is?
I believe you have a correct, committee member Johnson. Okay. And so that might be, again, another point in perhaps considering the public comment as this may need to be defined. If it needs to be, I don't know. Again, I'll leave that for the committee to discuss. And if you have anything to consider at this or comment on at this point, committee member Johnson, please do so.
Adam?
Yes.
I don't want to miss citizen comment. So after we're done with this item, I think you need to go back to EP 4.8 and 4.9. We have comments on both of those that we didn't go over on the previous page.
Yeah, Aaron, we were going to come back to that. That wasn't, we're doing only those items highlighted in yellow first, and we're going to hit.
Or 4.9 is highlighted in yellow.
Okay, thank you for that. So why don't we do this one first, and then we'll come back to 4.9. With respect to the proposed or the citizen comment for page 110, EP 5.2, by the proposed citizen comment, could I see hands of support supporting that alternative language? Please raise your hand. Okay, so the citizen comment with the proposed alternative language will be brought forward as we do have consensus on that item. Aaron, thank you very much for catching the comment to EP 4.9. Taylor, if we can come back to that, please. So in consideration of the previous action of the committee, we had a citizen comment that requested that the alternative language to what was just approved be replaced with strive for zero waste in city operations. Notably, again, because of the timeliness of this item, we haven't had a chance to vet this perhaps within the organization because this is referencing city operations that we can't, staff can't speak perhaps as well equipped as we'd like to regarding this item. But with that said, we'll ask for there to be consideration of the comment provided to the citizen comment on the screen before you. Could I ask for citizen review member to speak to that item. Committee Member Johnson.
Sorry, it's not on what's not on the screen is the language before the proposed alternative language here.
Yeah, I can.
What's he or she suggesting that this replace? Thank you.
So the proposal is to replace it with what, on the screen before
4.9. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
I think the alternative suggestion is an improvement. Thanks.
Thank you. Could I ask for hands of support replacing EP 4.9 with to be read as follows: strive for zero waste in city operations, period.
Aaron, does that belong there? Because this is about the waste. Is that where it would belong? Where city operations, it's all encompassing? Just a question. Sorry, this is Sheila. Thank you.
The question was, does 4.9 belong under the actual goal that it's listed
No,
under?
the revision of city operations.
I think yes, I think the citizen is just trying to alert us that, really to get to zero waste is not just in our solid waste department, but
That's
other
correct.
departments, like we would work with purchasing or some other, for some of the other things that we have already listed here. In terms of reducing waste as well. So
okay.
I think it would still belong. I think it would be fine if it stayed here.
Okay. That was my only question. Thank you.
Thank you. I see a hand raised by Committee Member Eng and then Jones. Okay, all hands are down. We do have support to replace 4.9 with strive for zero waste in city operations. So that will be incorporated. Moving on to 110. Is that correct? Did we just do 110, Taylor?
Yes, we did.
Okay. So the following item then would be 111. On this item, this was a previous request by Committee Member Jones to add the language of when appropriate, reduce street widths and parking requirements to limit unnecessary asphalt. Committee Member Jones, would you like to speak to that item?
Yeah, I still like that goal, and I think we should keep it in there. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I see hands of support for the addition of EP 7.6? Thank you. We do have consensus on that addition. The next item for consideration by the CRC is on page 123. Again, just that item that's identified in yellow. This was, I believe, new text that was requested by Committee Member Shimakubo. And so Committee Member Shimakubo, could you confirm that this text edition meets the intent of your request?
I don't recall that I said this. I apologize.
I believe this had to do with specifically security breaches. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yes, this was okay. Thank you. I'm sorry. So this was just to protect our power from security, outside influences. So I would like to keep this in here.
Great.
I apologize. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I see hands of support for the text highlighted in yellow? Please raise your hand now. Thank you. We do have consensus on that text edition. The next item for the CRC to consider was, I believe, another comment by Committee Member Shimakubo by adding the idea or commitment to Scottsdale being a golden rule city be incorporated into this chapter heading. Committee Member Shimakubo are you comfortable with the text edition?
I am very much. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Could I see hand of support for that text edition highlighted in yellow? Please raise your hand now. Thank you. We do have consensus on that addition. Moving on to the next item, CI 2.1. This was a comment made by committee member Jones to remove the words decide the range or distance and replace it with provide. Committee member Jones, are you comfortable with this change?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I see hand of support for CI 2.1? Thank you. We do have consensus on that addition found on page 133 that's highlighted, so we'll move on. We had a text addition, I believe it was on, thank you, Taylor, page 144. This was a request for an additional policy by, I believe, committee member Shimakubo, which intended to address providing open access for everybody versus disability access, which was what was noted on HC 5.3 above. Committee member Shimakubo, are you comfortable with the text addition for HC 5.6, which is and is intended to address inclusivity?
Yes, very much so. Thank you.
Thank you. I see a hand raised by committee member Newman. Committee member Newman.
No, I am sorry.
Oh, it's okay. Could I see hands of support for the text edition of HC 5.6? Please raise your hand now. Thank you. We do have consensus on that text edition. The next, I believe, and final item for review at this point is going to be found on page 172 as a yellow addition that was asked to be brought back, which was requested by committee member Johnson with the policy edition of C 3.8. Committee member Johnson, would you like to speak to that, please?
Boy, I don't recall championing this, but I don't have a problem with it reading it now.
Committee member Johnson, I believe it had to do with specifically identifying pedestrian zones.
Reducing the amount of traffic,
yes.
Motorized traffic. Yeah, this might have been someone else who's a better wordsmith than I, trying to channel my thinking, but I'm okay with the concept here.
Thank you. I see a hand raised by committee member Jones and then Yakovo.
Just the whole picture again. I mean, we probably have pictures of buses with somewhere in Scottsdale on them. So just an idea there. Thanks.
Thank you, committee member Jones. Committee member Yakovo. Okay. I'm sorry, committee member Yakovo, did you have something?
Yes. Can you clarify for me what periods of non-motorized pedestrian traffic means?
This is Johnson. I would hazard a guess that it maybe is the concept of like a farmer's market where you would close off a street for a farmer's market. Just an idea of an example. I don't know. I don't know if staff has any more insight than that.
Committee member Johnson, that would be a correct example. Committee member Yakovo, did you have additional comments on this item?
No, I just was curious what a period of non-motorized pedestrian traffic would be. Maybe it sounds like it's an event, or if we give an example of a farmer's market or something like that.
Thank you, committee member Yakovo. Would your desire be to have that example, an example be made within that sentence?
I think so, because I think it clarifies exactly what a period of non-motorized pedestrian traffic is.
Okay, so so such as a farmer's market.
For sure, that's what it means. But to the CRC members' credit, I do believe that is what it refers to, but it's not clear. So we either have to provide, I think, an example of what we're talking about for a period of non-motorized pedestrian traffic, and what is non-motorized, because does that mean, I've been to City North, for example, and there are people on scooters that are in the farmer's market. So we just have to be careful that we're not eliminating or creating an issue where there is not one.
Would it help Committee Member Yakovo to explicitly say areas of pedestrian only traffic instead of non-motorized?
Yes.
Okay, so I see a hand raised by Committee Member Bernowski.
Yes, I think a good example of that would be, for example, the TPC once a year, which closes down roads around Hayden, et cetera. And certainly it blocks motorized traffic.
Thank you. I see a hand raised by Committee Member Raymond.
As someone who does need to use a scooter for such for such events, that could be something that people could say, hey, there isn't supposed to be motorized vehicles. Could be a power wheelchair. So I agree with removing the non-motorized part out of it and put pedestrian only.
Great. So with that addition, or that modification would be incorporate dedicated pedestrian zones or areas of pedestrian only traffic into areas of the city that have the greatest intensity of development. Could I see hands raised in support of that text change? Thank you. We do have consensus on that modification, so C 3.8 will be modified. And that completes those items that were in yellow. We've got through those. We're going to go back now through those items that were found, the text change in red. And what I also want to kind of bring to the attention of the committee at this point in time is that we had comments that are found on that text block, for example, on page 91 before you, that came from a individual Scottsdale Environmental Advisory Committee member that came after our ability to incorporate legislative edits. And so the text change for page 91, the original text in red and the paragraph structure came from collectively members of Scottsdale Environmental Advisory Committee members. The text block in blue, with those items that are highlighted in blue, modifies that paragraph in a manner by one individual of members of Scottsdale Environmental Advisory Committee member. Could I ask for either Committee Member Johnson to lead it? I hate to put you on the spot there, but again, to perhaps help guide which portion of that text change would be most appropriate at this time, or if there's other committee members who would like to speak, please raise your hand now.
Taylor, this is Erin. Can you zoom in for the benefit of people at home as well? Thank you. Sorry, committee member Johnson, go ahead.
I was just going to say that I think Adam teed it up well. There are two choices here that are fairly similar. I think they're on the screen.
If I could provide a little bit of background to the comments that were provided in red, the Scottsdale Environmental Advisory Committee had the general plan update process and review of their plan. They wanted to review the plan ahead of a task force recommendation so as to incorporate their comments as early on as possible as a collective group. Those comments that were provided on the legislatively edited paragraph 3 on page 91 came as a support of the collective commission. Those comments in the blue text box came from one individual of that commission. In consideration of that, of understanding how those comments were received, could I ask for a committee member to respond to that? Committee member Yakovo and then Johnson.
I would just like to add the word noise to air, common noise, and water quality protection. But I think the intent is good, and what is written there is fine.
Committee member Yakovo, when you say what's written there with respect to the text that's in the box or not in the box?
Not in the box.
Okay. Committee member Johnson.
Yeah, it seems like the major change here is the words, addition of the words comprehensive, integrated, sustainable. I think that's a fine change that I can support in the box. In other words, thank you.
Thank you. And so we have a couple of different proposals at this point. It's to incorporate the box by committee member Johnson, but committee member Yakovo would like to add the word air. I'm sorry, was it air or noise? I believe it was noise.
Noise.
Noise. Thank you very much. Noise to that listing of items. Could I ask for an additional committee member to comment on those items? Committee member Johnson.
I'm supportive of the word noise, adding the word noise. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have adding the word noise to the box language. Could I see hands of support of supporting the box language at this time? Thank you. We do have consensus to incorporate that text that's proposed in the box with the addition of the word noise to that new listed items.
Adam, this is Erin.
Yes.
Just to clarify, it's just the additional words, but not the deletions in the box.
Committee member Johnson and Yakovo, could I ask you to address that?
Yes, I think this is a CRC member Yakovo. I think it is, to Aaron's point, it is the inclusion of the words that are not deleted in the box.
So if I could, this is Erin again, if I could summarize, it would be using the red text language outside of the box, adding comprehensive, integrated, and sustainable to that paragraph outside of the box, along with noise.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Could I see hands of support as mentioned by staff member Aaron Perot? Thank you. We do have consensus to that approach. The next item for consideration of the Citizen Review Committee, I believe, was found on page 100 with comments provided by Scottsdale's Environmental Advisory Commission to OS 7.5 with the text provided in red. OS 7.7 was a new policy proposed by members of that commission. However, in review of that policy, with the general plan being a citywide document, staff would like to suggest that the policy read as follows: increase trees and shade in public areas such as public parks and high pedestrian areas, period. I see a hand raised by committee member Johnson.
I'm supportive of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I see hands of support for those text additions with the amendment as I read on to page 100? Please raise your hand now. Thank you. We do have support of those additions and modifications. Moving on to page 105, Taylor. So back to this red text. Again, the original text in red was provided by collectively members of the Scottsdale Environmental Advisory Commission. We did receive a public comment on this item, but before we go to that public comment, in review of how that proposed language was provided, it kind of changes the tone and voice of the document. And so staff would like to suggest the committee consider the following. The first sentence would read, some of the impacts can be rising temperatures, resource depletion, increased waste, stress on our water supplies, etc., period. Sentence 2 would read, as a highly livable city that is environmentally and economically healthy, Scottsdale is proactive in seeking ongoing mitigation and resiliency solutions to these challenges, period. Along with the additional red text that follows it. The citizen comment that was received kind of mirrors a similar approach to it. Taylor, if you would please bring that up on screen. And so the addition that was provided to this language, again, it shortens the sentence as similar to the one I just read, and just slightly modifies it. And so, again, the term "we" hasn't been a commonly used word within the document, and so that's why the proposal would be to replace it with "Scottsdale is proactive." Could I ask Committee Member Johnson to speak to that, please?
I liked this sentence on the screen in red with the modification of Scottsdale is instead of we. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I see hands of support for Committee Members Johnson's support to incorporate these text changes to paragraph 3 of page 105? Please raise your hand now. Thank you. We will incorporate those changes. Moving on, I think the next, I believe the next comment for the committee's consideration, again, are comments that were brought forward by Scottsdale's Environmental Advisory Commission, leading with goal EP4, which brought the addition of circular economy thinking and principles such as to goal EP4. In review of that item, again, I guess I'd like to ask the committee if circular economy is a understandable term or readable policy, if that's such a thing, and incorporation of the text of goal EP4. Committee Member Johnson.
I'd like to suggest that we add the term circular economy to a glossary with a definition, and I'm happy to work on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Committee Member Johnson. Could I see hands of support for that proposal? Thank you. We do have consensus on doing so. EP 4.6 also brought forward the addition of promote and support. Could I see hands of support for that addition as well? Thank you. We do have consensus on that. We do have the next item on page 110. I'll address the first box found on the upper portion of the screen, which had to do with, again, an individual comment from a member of the Environmental Commission, which asked that we somehow include circular or reuse concept into the plan. We just did so with goal EP4. And Committee Member Johnson, again, I'll lean on you as the resident expert here, if you feel that that's sufficiently covered with our recent action.
I'm unclear about where this box on the top of the page is supposed to go.
It was intended to be a new policy to state, where possible, purchase products that are manufactured with clear circular reuse concept by companies committed to circular manufacturing process.
Adam, this is Erin. I think the commission member was trying to be helpful on a definition for circular economy with this particular versus an actual new policy.
Okay. Thank you,
I
Erin.
believe what's contained in that box in the upper portion is redundant with EP 4.11.
Okay.
I mean, circular and green are not identical, but I think they're close. Thank you.
Thank you. And so I guess with regard to the other red text that's on screen, we have the addition of EP 4.11 and EP 4.12 by members of Scottsdale Environmental Advisory Commission in review of EP 4.12. Perhaps staff had reviewed this and thought that perhaps replacing substantially increase with the words encourage would be more appropriate, be that we don't currently provide multifamily recycling. But again, committee member Johnson, I'll lean on you to perhaps consider that comment. We also had a comment on EP 4.12 by the public comment that was received today. Taylor, if you would, please pull that up on the screen. In that proposal, it was to replace composting with diversion to be more inclusive of other options. Committee member Johnson or other members of the committee, would you like to respond to that?
I think diversion is, this is Johnson again. I think diversion is a more all-encompassing term.
Okay, thank you. And then finally, we had again an individual policy addition by a member of the Scottsdale Environmental Advisory Commission to, it looks like, modify EP 4.12 that was approved or supported by the commission as a whole with the proposed text changes. Committee member Johnson, I guess, would you like to respond to that, recognizing that it sounds like we will replace composting with diversion?
So the proposal is in the box, amending the previous proposal.
Yes.
I think the box is an improvement with the change of the word diversion instead of composting. Thank you.
Wonderful. So it sounds like we'll delete the new policy box, keep 4.11 and utilize the box and replace composting with diversion at the top. Could I see hands of support with that modification? We do have hands of support for consensus. And so the next item for the committee's review and consideration is going to be on EP 7.1, found on page 111, which added the words heat, as well as language additions for EP 7.2 found in red on the screen before you. We also have, I guess let's address those two first because we have some citizen comment on the ones that follow. Could I see hands of support for EP 7.1 and 7.2 as amended? Thank you. So we do have hands of support for those modifications. Moving on to policies EP 7.7 and EP 7.8 and EP 7.9. These were all additions that were requested by the Scottsdale Environmental Advisory Commission.
Excuse me, Adam.
Yes, Taylor.
I'm just seeing we did have one for EP 4.8 that we did not look at yet. Could we go back to that?
Yeah, before we do, I see a hand raised by Committee Member Jones.
Sure, I just wanted to point it out.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. Maybe it's late. I'm not opposed to the word diversion. Maybe if board member or committee member Johnson can help me understand what diversion means over composting and other things. I've just not heard that term. Thank you.
Yeah, this is Committee Member Johnson. The idea is to divert waste from going to the landfill by way of recycling, reuse, repurposing, or reduction in some other way. So the idea is to divert from the landfill. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Just as long as that's what it means to the rest of the world. Just that I didn't know what diversion meant, and yes, that's a great idea and a great use of the word. Thank you.
If that should be a candidate for the glossary, I'm happy to help and to support that. Thank you.
Thank you. Taylor, can we go back to 4.8, please? So 4.8 had proposed alternative language from a citizen comment. Taylor, if you could please pull it up on the screen after giving everyone a moment to review it here on the screen. And again, I want to apologize to the Citizen Review Committee. Staff's trying to manage these public comments that were submitted, and you can tell there's a lot of them, but believe me, we're in the home stretch here, but we got them rather late, and so we're just trying to make sure that we don't miss anything, so that's why we're coming back here, so I apologize for that. The proposed EP 4.8 alternative language and the reasons behind such are found on the screen before you, but 4.8 would read as follows: promote and implement programs that reduce the amount of biodegradable waste going into the landfill, such as waste food prevention, food and yard waste composting, and anaerobic digestion. Could I ask for committee members to consider that comment at this point in time? Committee Member Johnson.
Yeah, I think that's an improvement. I mean, my guess is that words like anaerobic digestion are going to probably be lost on many citizens. But again, if this should go through, I'm happy to help put that in the glossary.
Committee Member Johnson, again, staff just received this, and I'm certainly not green by any means to the extent of being an expert. And I know perhaps you are better than I. Can you, for the sake of folks listening and other committee members, illustrate, if you know, what anaerobic digestion is?
Anaerobic digestion involves taking things such as food and other organic waste, and you put it into essentially a digester, which eliminates the methane that comes off of it, which if you deposit it in a landfill, it will generate methane over the life of the landfill. If you do anaerobic digestion of that kind of green and organic waste and food waste, you can manage the methane essentially. Thank you.
Thank you, and sorry for the test question. Just again, I think it would help, and it would help Committee Member Jones from asking, what is that? Is that right, Committee Member Jones?
Well, yeah, thank you. Just one comment. I think we're getting into a bit of weeds in this section. Maybe not. I mean, this isn't my forte, but I just see a lot of verbiage in here and direction that is very specific. And this is the general plan. So just a comment. Thank you.
Thank you. So it seemed like Committee Member Raymond, please.
I agree with that. I mean, we're going to hold the city to all of these. I just want to make sure that it's vetted properly before we make a decision on putting it in the general plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Were there additional comments from the committee? And I guess I'll just mention that we just replaced the word composting with diversion here. I don't know if it's appropriate to do the same. Committee Member Johnson.
Yeah, I think just for consistency's sake, replace composting with diversion. I think and anaerobic digestion can be eliminated if it's too confusing, too technical, too, we're getting into the minutia here a bit, but I'm agreeing with those comments. Thanks.
Thank you.
Adam, this is Erin. I might suggest that we take these two particular policies, 4.8 and what's the diversion one, 4.12.
Yes.
We can always bring them back. I mean, the CRC isn't going to adopt this final plan of whatever they decide on until December. So we could certainly revisit a couple of these since they did come in so late and they haven't been vetted through anything. For example, if the anaerobic digestion is specific to landfills, our landfill agreement and where we send our waste is outside of the city. So we don't have a lot of control over that piece of it. So I think it's probably worth holding off on a couple of these items and vetting them through different city departments first.
Thank you for that, Erin. If I could just see hands of support for staff to bring back EP 4.8 and EP 4.12 at a later date, please raise your hand now. Thank you. We do have consensus on that. And so Taylor, help me out here. Our next item was on, I believe, EP 7.7, 7.8, 7.9. Perfect. And I believe we had some citizen comment relating to, bear with me, EP 7.8. Erin, did you have something?
I was just going to tell you 7.8.
Oh, thank you. So with respect to 7.7, this original red text came from the Scottsdale Environmental Advisory Commission, and in review of that language, staff thought that we could, be a little bit more succinct with the language by stating 7.7 as follows: collaborate with public and private entities for best practices on heat mitigation strategies. Could I ask for Committee Member Johnson to, I guess, respond to that text change? And then I see a hand raised by Committee Member Jones.
This is Committee Member Johnson. I think the idea here is that heat mitigation and the heat issue in the future will not be limited to the city of Scottsdale municipal boundaries. That's the whole point here, is that we need to have regional, statewide, and even national support for best practices in this area. Thank you.
Thank you. It sounds like we would leave them the language as proposed in EP 7.7. We'll do these three as individual items. Could I see hands of support by leaving that proposed text of EP 7.7 in red? Hands of support, please raise your hand now. We do have consensus on that, so we'll move on to 7.8. And on 7.8, as I mentioned, we have a new policy proposed by members of the Scottsdale Environmental Advisory Commission. And we reviewed this policy and would like the committee to consider, as we do with every policy or goal addition, what effectively is being, improved on with the plan and its proposed addition, or if we're being redundant. And so we'll look real quick at the citizen comment received on EP 7.8, which was to replace the proposed language to read as follows: utilize, support, and promote transportation measures that reduce carbon emissions. In review of those text changes, Taylor, if you could pull up the next analysis slide that we had on here. That policy addition, we believe, staff exists within policy EP 3.1, where it is read as follows: reduce automobile emissions through traffic management, transportation improvements, promote of alternative modes, such as ride sharing, bicycling, travel demand reduction strategies, and use of electric and alternative fuel vehicles. I do see a hand raised by committee member Schweiger. It looks like it just went down. Again, committee member Jones.
Thank you, Adam. I don't like many of these, but the policy EP 3.1 I think is a better goal than the proposed new EP 7.8. Thank you.
Thank you, committee member Jones. Were there any additional committee member Yakovo?
I agree that policy EP 3.1 is good. And just as an aside, I'm not in favor of the word utilize. If we go with the proposed language changes, I would prefer to use the word use. Utilize to me is you're utilizing a wrench to open a paint can as opposed to using a paint can opener. So you're using something not intended for its use to do something that it's going to do that's not intended for its use. Does that make sense?
Thank you, committee member Yakovo. It sounds like we have utilizes the term that's being proposed by the public comment that was provided, but it sounds like we have a couple different opinions. Committee member Johnson.
I would just speak in favor of 7.8 with the word use in front of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I see, is there any additional comments on this? Because we had a citizen comment, I'll ask, in consideration of that comment first, now with the discussion made by the Citizen Review Committee, would be to incorporate new policy EP 7.8 with the words use, support, and promote transportation measures that reduce carbon emissions. Can I see hands of support with that new policy addition? We do have consensus to incorporate that language. EP 7.9 was the next comment that was provided by the Environmental Advisory Commission. And in review of that document, or that policy edition rather, Taylor, if you could go back to our analysis slide. Notably, if you'll look at the policy edition of the words where the measure is in public and private buildings, we have two goals and one policy that speak to private enterprise addressing the same policy in a similar manner. And goal E4 seeks to create means to increase energy efficiency within city facilities and operations. And so, again, we believe that perhaps this might be a redundant slide. And I'll also mention that as a reminder to the committee and folks that might be watching at home, we do have a new energy element that addresses much of this. And so I'll ask for the committee to consider that new proposed text edition at this point. If you would, please speak to this item at this time. Committee member Yakovo.
I think the proposed text is redundant to the goals E1, E15, E3, and E4. So I would say that we don't need to incorporate new policy EP 7.9.
Thank you. Could I, Committee Raymond?
I agree with her statement. Thank you.
Thank you. With that said, could I ask for the committee to, were any additional comments on this policy? Please raise your hand now. Having heard from two committee members who would like to not incorporate this new policy, EP 7.9, could I see hands of support that affirm such? Thank you. So we have approval to not incorporate the new policy edition of EP 7.9. The next series of comments that were provided found on page 113, 117, and 119, and we'll go through them in a similar order. Had to do, Taylor, if you could zoom into it, please. Paragraph 2, the text addition was to restore the word gray water from that paragraph, and quite frankly, the two additional comments that will be reviewed on page 117 and 119 have a similar effect. However, if you'll notice, that original text was crossed out in green by the city's technical advisory committee member. Specifically, this was representatives from the city's water department, and their rationale was such that their preference was to manage gray water systems within the city's water infrastructure and not privately, as we have a better way and ability to manage and treat gray water. And so could I ask for committee members to respond to reinstating gray water, having understand that Scottsdale staff is not in support of doing such? Committee member Jones.
Just again, we just keep adding stuff just because now I know it's coming from the commission, it's their specialty, but again, we're just sort of trying to hit every angle, every note, and I'm not sure that's the goal of the general plan, but that's just a comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I ask for additional comments? Seeing none, Taylor, did you want to pull up that comment by the citizen comment, which was again to restore gray water? I'll ask because, again, the citizen comment was to consider that we restore gray water. If you'd like to restore gray water into that paragraph, please raise your hand now. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised to restoring gray water, and so we will not restore gray water. We also have text additions of converting to xeriscape landscaping and more into paragraph 2. Could I see hands of support for that item? Please raise your hand now. I'm not seeing hands. I'm not seeing consensus to incorporate that language as well. And so no language proposed in red to paragraph 2 on page 113 will be incorporated. Moving on to the next item for review, which was again another public comment here on page 117. Taylor, it was E Conservation 4.7. It was a public comment by the citizen to again incorporate and restore the language of and gray water systems. Could I see hands of support to restore the original language of and gray water systems? Please raise your hand now. Seeing no hands raised, that will not be incorporated into the amended changes. Moving on to page 119. This was again a request to consider reinstating gray water at this location. Could I ask for hands of support to incorporate gray water back into the proposed language? Please raise your hand now. And I'll just mention that there's rationale provided now on the screen before you. Seeing no hands raised, that will not be incorporated into page 119. We had a comment provided, a couple comments on page 123. Taylor, did I miss something? Page 115. Yeah, we need to come back. Thank you. Page 115 was proposed policy edition, Taylor, if you would please pull it up, and let's for a moment, if you can go back to the other slide. Taylor, if you can go back to the other slide that shows the goal and how it reads. Conservation Goal 2. Conservation Goal 2 reads as follows: protect and manage Sonoran desert biodiversity and native ecosystems. There was a request to add a new policy addition in this location by citizen comment. And Taylor, if you would go to that now. To strive to reduce pesticide use by employing non-chemical and least toxic pest management strategies. Again, in this, I guess in consideration of this comment, the city can only control itself in this regard. And perhaps, again, it's just something for the committee to consider at this point. Committee Member Jones, I see a hand raised.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. Again, getting really specific. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee Member Johnson.
Thank you. I'm favorable towards this language. I'm not sure this is the right place, and I think that's what you're alluding to. So thank you.
Thank you. Committee Member Johnson, I'll note just for Taylor, if you would please pull it up, page 116. Page 116 of the draft plan, Conservation 3.4 has a policy that's specific to protecting the integrity of watersheds, specific to minimizing the use of chemicals for landscape maintenance. But in the policy that was provided by the citizen comments, it's intended to represent really all aspects of conservation and not just the watershed. And so we've heard from both Committee Member Johnson and Jones. Would either of you like to speak to that in consideration now of Conservation 3.4? Committee Member Johnson.
Can you back this out? I want to see what the goal is at the top of this. Protect the integrity of watersheds. Okay. Like I said, I'm favorable to that language. I'm not sure if 3.4 does it justice. So I'd like to see those words incorporated somewhere in the document, but I'm willing to let the staff figure that out and come back with a proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee Member Johnson, and I guess if I could ask the rest of the committee to consider, we could bring this back with those other two items that were discussed, if the committee would, so oblige. Could I see hands of support that we bring back different language that addresses the intent of Conservation 2.7? Please raise your hand now. Thank you very much. I do see hands of support for that effort, and so we'll be doing that at a later date. Moving on to page 123, Taylor. We have a proposal by an individual member of the Scottsdale Environmental Advisory Commission to modify the text that's proposed in red by removing "and help us move towards potential energy independence," period. So could I ask for Committee Member Yacovo I saw her hand raised.
Yes, so this is Committee Member Yacovo. I would be an advocate for removing good paying green energy jobs to be, this can also create green energy jobs, because good paying is argumentative, and who's to decide what those are?
Thank you very much for the comment. Committee Member Johnson.
Yeah, I concur with that. I also concur with the line through text in the box toward the top of the page to remove "and help us move towards potential energy independence." Thank you.
Thank you. Committee Member Jones.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. I'm just trying to focus at this point, but I'm just seeing that this sort of stressing green energy and clean energy. The energy element is all energy. Is that correct?
Correct.
So it appears as if we are strongly biased towards standard energy, and I guess fossil fuels is one of them. And I just want to make sure that I'm in favor of all energy, and as a citizen and as a committee member. So just if you see at the end of all these ups and downs and ins and outs of what we're changing in verbiage here, and I vote no, it's probably from one of these several changes, but it's not to the whole bunch of changes. Thank you.
Thank you for the comment, Committee Member Jones. Committee Member Yakovo.
Yes, I agree with this comment. So like if we could strike out the entire red sentence because it's not necessarily indicative of the goals of the energy requirement in the general plan. We don't need to provide reasons for the decisions that we're making, just that we should be less reliant on fossil fuels and more reliant on clean energy and renewable energy like the rest of the country is, and leave the part about jobs out. Thank you.
Thank you. Was there additional comments from the committee on that sentence in red? So I'm going to move towards proposing that the committee consider first. It sounded like we had some amended language that was in agreement by Committee Member Johnson and I believe one other committee member that would modify the sentence in red to "this can also create green energy jobs, period." Could I see hands of support that would support that sentence? Please do so by raising your hand now. We do not have, but I'll give everyone a moment. Please raise your hand now if you'd like to do that. It does not appear we have consensus to incorporate that text change. Let me ask, would the committee like to remove the sentence in red, as well as not acknowledge that text box in blue on the screen before you? Please raise your hand now. So we have consensus to remove that sentence in red, as well as not incorporate any portion of the text box in blue. Thank you. We've got just a couple last items and then we'll wrap up. Page 124, Taylor, please. This was a SEAC comment for a new policy to promote energy efficiency improvements for existing residential properties and educate property owners on opportunities for such improvements. Key here are efficient energy efficiency and education opportunities. Taylor, if you would please go to the supplementary slide. In review of the proposed policy addition, there were a series of other goals and policies that we believe reach the same intent. And so we would like the committee to consider that in review of this proposed policy addition. If I could ask for a committee member to speak to this slide at this point, please raise your hand now. I see Committee Member Johnson hand raised.
Yeah, I appreciate the slide. I'm still in favor of new policy E 1.6. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any additional comments on this item? Seeing none, could I ask that the committee consider the addition of new policy E 1.6 as presented on the screen before you? Please raise your hand now. Give everyone one more moment. We do not have consensus to incorporate policy E 1.6 at this point in time. So we will move on. And I believe this brings us to our final item of the evening, page 160. Taylor, please. This would be to, there was this comment from a member of the Scottsdale Environmental Advisory Committee, which was to provide a citywide Wi-Fi infrastructure that is robust, resilient, and on solar or battery driven in case of an emergency. We have power outages that affect large swaths of the city. We've had a chance to review that policy and actually consult with our city's emergency manager, Troy Latrick. I apologize for the name, perhaps mispronunciation. But Taylor, could you put all up the supplementary slide, please? In review of that new policy edition, Troy had asked that I bring to the attention of the commission a number of different programs and infrastructure that's available for disaster preparation. We have WIA, which is the Wireless Emergency Alert System, which operates similar to Amber Alerts. We have the Emergency Alert System, which operates on AM, FM radio, and TV emergency messages. We have NOAA, which is weather radio messages. We also subscribe to a system that is called SENS, which in that instance, it's the reverse 911, which is an online individual pre-registration program where 911 can reach out in the event of a disaster. Best example I can give of that was one where I believe Hawaii got incoming notice of a potential missile that was coming to Hawaii earlier last year or the year before. And we also have the Alert Sends, which is an internal city employee notification system that can be activated by 911 communications supervisor, emergency management, and communication staff. And so in consideration of the new policy that was proposed, there are two existing policies that we believe manages that proposed text edition. Taylor, if you could, next slide, please. It would be the S1.3 of the safety element, which says identify and replace vulnerable infrastructure and critical service lifelines, as well as S2.2, which speaks to enhancing communication capabilities and preparation for all phases of a disaster. Could I ask for the Citizen Review Committee to consider the new policy edition and speak to it now? Committee Member Raymond.
This could be a very big financial obligation on the city's budget, and I don't know that we should be putting that in the general plan, but of course it would be ideal to have something like this, but I think that S1.3 and S2.2 addresses areas that we can get some improvement.
Thank you, Committee Member Raymond. I'll also mention that that the intent of those goals, again, is that it provides a broader perspective, whereas the proposed policy edition may be, again, very specific. Committee Member Jones.
I agree. This is a sort of a wish list item. It would be great to have, but I think that S1.3 and S2.2 satisfy what we need to do here, and we don't need the new policy.
Thank you. I've heard from two committee members regarding not including new policy on the screen before you. And so I'll ask, is the committee's consensus to not include the new policy edition on the screen before you? Please raise your hand now. Thank you. We do have consensus to not include this new policy as proposed by Scottsdale Environmental Advisory Commission. And I believe that wraps up. Taylor, Aaron, please speak up if I missed anything. But I believe that completes all of our review of bring back items at this point in time. So having reviewed, discussed these items, I'd ask for a motion to approve the incorporation of the suggested legislative edits based on comments made by the public, city staff, and CRC members concerning any sections of the plan previously discussed by the Citizen Review Committee. And we also will note those items for bring back. I don't have them noted in front of me, but I know we have them written down for a couple bring back items at a later date pertaining to the sustainability and environmental chapter. Could I ask for a motion at this point for item 3? Committee Member Yacovo.
Yes, I move that we accept item 3 as complete.
Thank you. Could I ask for a second? Committee Member Bernowski.
A second.
Thank you. We'll do a roll call vote at this time. Committee Member Bernowski.
Yes.
Thank you. Committee Member Moraldi.
Yes.
Thank you. Committee Member Dodd.
Yes.
Committee Member Eng.
Yes.
Thank you. Committee Member Yacovo.
Yes.
Thank you. Committee Member Johnson.
Yes.
Thank you. Committee Member Jones.
No.
Thank you. Committee Member Newman. Committee Member Newman. Committee Member Newman, I don't see a microphone. Can you speak, or we'll come back? We'll come back. Committee Member Raymond.
Yes.
Committee Member Scarborough. Committee Member Schweiger.
Yeah.
Committee Member Indigoyan.
Yes.
Thank you. Committee Member Shimakubo.
Yes.
Thank you. Committee Member Newman.
Yes.
Thank you. Committee Member Scarborough. Okay. Do not hear or acknowledge Committee Member Scarborough for item 3, so he will not have a recorded vote. That does complete our agenda for this evening. With respect to staff updates, is item 6. I just want to recognize again 2 primary members that were added to the committee. We have Committee Member Moraldi, who replaced Committee Member Cromarty on behalf of the Neighborhood Advisory Commission, and Committee Member Aloy Indigoyan, who replaced Committee Member Scutari from the Scottsdale's IDA. We appreciate and want to thank the previous members for their service to this committee, and welcome Committee Member Moraldi and Indigoyan in their respective capacities. I still see 2 hands raised by Committee Member Yacovo and then Newman. Looks like both hands just went. Committee Member Newman, did you?
I'm sorry. Thank you. I was just going to say thank you.
Oh, no problem. So again, we just want to recognize those 2 new primary members. The next meeting of the Citizen Review Committee will be on Monday, September 21st. Want to thank all the committee for hanging in there this evening as we kind of got through, as we just did, all of those bring back items. And so we're making good headway in the plan and hope to maintain our work plan schedule and have a recommended draft plan that the committee can support through our process. And again, appreciate all the time and commitment you've all given to this process so far. Again, thank you all for this evening, and we'll see you all next on Monday, September 21st.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.